in a more censorious culture, so-called cancel culture, do you not now have to be more aware of potentially causing offence through your comedy?
I suppose so. I mean, sometimes I'll ask my daughter or my goddaughter, they'll say, can I say these things? And they'll say, yeah, that's okay, or not, But I don't worry about it. I'm not saying terribly controversial things. I'm trying to make them laugh. And if they don't laugh, well, that's a failure. You don't want them to not laugh. So I'm trying to keep them entertained or write some new ones. And that's also quite a nice challenge, to be able to just write another funny song.
Has doing this tour given you a new sense of your life and your career and what you've achieved through comedy? And many years left, but you're regarding it all, aren't you?
Well, yes, because you get to a certain age, and physically it's tiring, so I can't do every night because you don't want to, hobble on, and you ought to put the energy out there to make them laugh. The pride of that. After I'll create a show, and then after the first show, I'll tighten it up and change things. And I've got a very weird, wonderful, odd song to start off with, which I think might well work, but you don't know until you do it for the first time to the audience.
Do you want to try it out on us?
No. Suppose you didn't laugh. And it's actually from Death the Musical. A guy writing a play about Death the Musical, learning he's dying of pancreatic cancer, which is quite ironic.
Well, was this before you had pancreatic cancer?
Before I had pancreatic cancer, I went to my doctor and said, I've got to get rid of a character very quickly. Yeah. What's the quickest way to get rid of a character? And he said, pancreatic cancer. You may only have 3 weeks, 3 months. And then 12 years later, we're looking at a screen, and I said, what's that? And he said, pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And I laughed, because I thought it was very funny. There's the person writing the book about the writer writing a play called, but I was very fortunate, because he spotted it through a blood test. And so within 10 days, they whipped it out. And I'm still here, just about, So I feel like I had a reprieve, and that life is really great, and every day is really great. And I think that's how you really should live, a day at a time. We pretend, no, we'll be here forever, but we aren't going to be here forever.
Thank you for listening to the interview from the BBC World Service. You'll find more in-depth conversations on The Interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts, including episodes with the fantasy author Sir Philip Pullman, the conductor Gustavo Dudamel, and journalist Maria Ressa. You can also hear more leading artists and creative people talking to me, John Wilson, on the BBC's This Cultural Life. Until the next time, bye for now.
From the BBC, that was The Interview. I'm Saroja Coelho.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are glad to be back with you after being on the road in Brandon last week. Corey Funk and I, that is. Big thanks to those who filled in for me. I know that Julie Buckingham was here for a couple of days, and then Corey was hosting yesterday, and hopefully if you had an Easter long weekend off, you had a good time with your friends and family here in Manitoba. And again, thanks for joining us on CBC's Morning Show. We're on air with you until 8:37 a.m., and welcome to the show. Let's say good morning to the team. I mentioned Corey Funk. Corey directs the show, and we'll be covering the commute on air. Good morning, Mr. Abby Adeyemi. Abby's behind the controls, our senior tech, and Abby covers weather. And let's say good morning to Darren Marash, who is our YouTube producer. So say hello to Darren if you're watching the show stream live. We are expecting some snow. In fact, we've got a yellow level snowfall warning for around Gimlian area, and you are expecting some snow that could bring you up to 10-15 centimeters today, so we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll get more into the weather as the show continues here. Not quite the warmth we're waiting for yet, but by the end of the week, we should see a turn. All right, Heather Wells is in at 2 minutes to 6 with our local news headlines to start. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a refugee advocate says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing many Somalis north. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in anti-immigration tirades. The Salvation Army says more than half of the refugees that stayed at its Winnipeg shelter in the past 6 months came from the U.S., so we'll hear more on that. And it is not just springtime in Winnipeg. It's also nearing election time. In just a little over 3 weeks, Winnipeggers vote in a civic election in October, and starting in May, mayoral candidates can register to run. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
So we will find out in a little over 3 weeks who's going to be running. We vote in the fall, of course, and we'll see what happens. Next year, of course, then we also have a provincial election, so 'tis the season again. In the show this morning, did you watch all of the Artemis 2 mission? I was watching that 40-minute blackout yesterday. What would they say when they return those astronauts after being the first humans to be as far away from Earth as any human has ever gone before? It was Star Trek in real life. We're going to talk about this with the head of the planetarium this morning. In addition, this morning, you know that spring is trying to break through when ice cream begins rolling in town. CBC's Jim Agapito with that.
On cue, Robert Bateman has spent his whole life painting and protecting the natural world. But even with all that success, he's had to fight to be taken seriously as an artist. Robert will be here to talk about that journey and why he thinks his work has been left out of the National Gallery of Canada.
They think I'm just too digestible, sort of like a peanut butter cookie or something.
Q with Tom Power, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. There is panic on the streets of Tehran as residents scramble through the rubble of fresh airstrikes. There has been a desperate plea from the Iranian regime asking people to shield the country's infrastructure from Washington's promised bombing campaign. Here is a regime official on state television.
I invite all the youth, athletes, artists, university students, and our professors to gather around the power plants that are our national assets and capital.
The deadline imposed by Donald Trump to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is just hours away. The U.S. president has threatened to decimate Iran's bridges and power grid if the shipping lane remains closed. For more on The View from Washington, we're joined by the CBC's Willie Lowry. Willie, over the last month or so, we've seen several of Trump's deadlines come and go without consequence. Is that likely to happen again tonight?
Martina, all rhetoric out of the White House points to this 8 p.m. deadline as being set in stone. U.S. President Donald Trump has already pushed his ultimatum back several times, and the remaining hours are a critical period. But it is also clearly a negotiation tactic, as the U.S. looks for ways to pressure Iran into capitulating. Thus far, that has not happened, and mediators led by Pakistan have yet to be able to bring the two sides close enough together where a ceasefire is feasible. Trump says any deal will likely require Iran to allow the safe passage of oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
We have to have a deal that's acceptable to me. And part of that deal is going to be we want free traffic of oil and everything else. Mr. President.
As you point out, Willie, the president has been explicit about targeting Iranian infrastructure. What is the response in Washington to warnings that that could constitute a war crime?
Democrats have been very vocal about their concerns. Targeting civilian infrastructure can be a violation of international law, which prohibits the specific targeting of civilian energy infrastructure for the purpose of forcing an adversary to negotiate. Trump brushed aside any concerns that he might be committing war crimes when asked by reporters. Meanwhile, some in the military establishment believe the targets are fair game because they are dual use, meaning the military also uses and relies on them. Here's retired U.S. Admiral Andy Loisel.
Obviously, they benefit civilians, but they also provide the power to run any of the military systems that they have remaining left to them. So I would refer to them as dual-use targets.
The chances of the International Criminal Court pursuing charges against the Trump administration if it carries through with its threats are next to zero.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
The man heralded as Australia's most decorated living soldier is now charged with war crimes. Ben Robert Smith served in Afghanistan between 2006 and 2012. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for his service. He now faces 5 war crimes murder charges. Police say Robert Smith was involved in the deaths of Afghans who were not taking part in hostilities when they were killed. Chrissy Barrett is Australia's Federal Police Commissioner.
It will be alleged the victims were detained, unarmed, and were under the control of ADF members when they were killed. It will be alleged the victims were shot by the accused or shot by subordinate members of the ADF in the presence of and acting on the orders of the accused.
3 newspapers previously published allegations Robert Smith murdered Afghan civilians. He failed in his attempt to sue those papers for defamation. Alberta's separatist movement and lawyers for Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation will be in court this morning. A 3-day hearing is about to begin. It will consider whether a separatist referendum violates Indigenous treaty rights. The CBC's Joe Horwood takes us through the arguments.
Whenever it comes to treaty, then we have to do something.
Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation Chief Sheldon Sunshine says their fight isn't necessarily with separatists, but with government.
Our treaty was signed with the Crown. Canada has a responsibility to uphold that.
Sunshine says the lawsuit was prompted by the Alberta government's passing of Bill 14, which removed the requirement for a referendum question to align with the Constitution. The First Nation says separation would violate treaty rights enshrined in Section 35 of the Constitution Act.
This is against Alberta and the Chief Electoral Officer for allowing that unconstitutional question. And of course, we name Canada to see where they are in all of this.
There are 2 ways a referendum gets on the ballot. One, with a successful citizen petition.
Or the provincial government, whichever way we decide to do that.
That's separatist leader Mitch Sylvester speaking on a podcast last month. While he's not confident his initiative will survive today's hearing, he expects the question will still be on the ballot.
I would absolutely expect it to go forward.
Should the injunction be denied, Chief Sunshine says there will be a lot of work to be done ahead of a possible referendum. Joe Horwood, CBC News, Calgary.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is asking the people of his province what they think about a social media ban. Australia imposed one 4 months ago for kids under age 16. And as Helena Mahalik reports, it's prompted a lot of discussion about how to keep young Canadians safe online.
It is time for us to have a conversation about, social media.
Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe says families in the province should start talking about a growing issue.
Social media use in our youth, in our students, and, potentially 16 and under.
Canada currently has no plans for a federal policy change, but proposed an online harm bill back in 2024 under the previous government. Kevin Waugh, a Conservative Saskatchewan MP, is on a parliamentary committee studying the issue. He's unsure if one province alone can make the change.
Social media platforms, they operate across borders internationally. I'm not sure the provinces can impose rules outside their jurisdictions.
High schoolers in the province have mixed feelings about the proposed restrictions.
You just lose a lot of time with friends, going outside with your family.
News I see on social media too, and some things I wouldn't know about, and activities outside and opportunities.
Evidence suggests social media has a negative impact on young people's mental health. Tamara Hintz, a childhood psychiatrist, says it comes up every day in her practice.
Self-esteem, body image, bullying, even just sort of more general effects from being on cell phones all the time.
But Hintz says parents also play a huge role, and that more supervision and control is needed when it comes to children's screen time. Helena Mahalik, CBC News, Saskatoon.
The Artemis 2 crew are on their way back to Earth. Their record-setting loop around the far side of the moon is over. This leg of the mission, a success.
So we saw Earth disappear, but we were so busy with the science. And we have such faith in our vehicle integrity, such faith in mission control, that we were just at complete peace and just doing our job.
Astronaut Jeremy Hansen isn't the only Canadian playing a major role. As Karen Pauls reports, astronaut Jenny Gibbons is working as a lunar capsule communicator.
Today, for all humanity, you're pushing beyond that frontier.
That voice from NASA's Mission Control in Houston to the Artemis 2 crew is Jenny Gibbons.
I'm just so pleased for Jeremy. I am so pleased for Canada. We saw so much cool stuff on the moon, and I really am just
thrilled to be a part of it. What a cool day.
She's the Canadian Space Agency astronaut who trained as a backup to Jeremy Hansen and the primary voice link between the ground flight control team and Orion, communicating flight details and technical tasks.
It was a testament to some of the amazing stuff that you can achieve and learn when you have a shared mission and a shared goal.
U.S. President Donald Trump echoed that when he called the crew later.
Today you've made history and made all America really proud.
Hansen thanked Trump for his leadership.
I've said this many times before. A nation that leads like that and creates and sets big goals for humanity that brings other countries along with it is truly incredible.
These are the first astronauts in more than half a century to be cut off from the rest of humanity when their spaceship slipped behind the moon, severing communications with mission control. When Christina Cook reestablished contact 40 minutes later,
it is so great to hear from Earth again.
It was Gibbons who responded.
We are earthbound and ready to bring you home.
After they return, the crew has been invited to the Oval Office, where Trump says he wants their autographs. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Well, good morning from Earth, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on that app and on YouTube. It is not going to warm up here as much as we'd hoped. At least not yet. We actually are expecting some more snow to be moving in. And apologies to Gimli, because I think I scared you before 6 o'clock. You're not in the heart of the snow that's coming. Abby's going to talk more, though, about what centers are. You are included on the list, though, and we're talking 15 to 30 centimeters coming for parts of Manitoba. Yep. Well, let's get into what else is happening this hour on the show besides the weather and getting you ready for your Tuesday after the long weekend. Well, some people held hands this weekend because of Easter's. Others locked arms. We're going to hear about a niche up-and-coming sport, arm wrestling, and what happened this weekend in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, rather. Also, this hour on the program, long-term care homes all across the country are using antipsychotic drugs far more than they should. There's a new report out about this. You might recall that there was data a couple of years ago on this. Well, they're continuing to track it, and it's problematic. So stay tuned. We're going to learn about that. That's coming up at 6:40. Let's go to Heather Wells now for other stories and headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a refugee advocate says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing many Somalis north. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in anti-immigration tirades, his immigration moving to remove protections that let some of them work and live in the U.S. Najib Warsame says many have come to Manitoba to avoid persecution south of the border. So we'll hear more about that as well. Winnipeg's Iranian community is watching closely as war continues in their home country. Saeed Ghavami at the Iranian Monarchists of Manitoba has only been able to speak briefly to his family a couple of times in the last 6 weeks. He says people are getting anxious as this war drags on. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
And now we're going to get into this weather forecast, which I keep watching up. So I will give the warning here because I have the details in front of me. So first I said Gimli, and then I said no Gimli. Here's what's happening, people. Yes, Gimli's included, but this is a far bigger system than just affecting Gimli. So there's a yellow level snowfall warning. It does include Gimli, Selkirk, Stonewall, Bissett, Victoria Beach, but then also over to Dauphin, Russell, up through the Riding Mountain Park area, as well as Rossburn, and then Rosedale, and then St. Rose across to McCreary, and then all the way through Hecla as well, if we make that full circle. So we're talking 15 to 30 centimeters of snowfall. This is a late season Alberta clipper, and it should bring that into this afternoon. The heavy snow tapering off over tonight and into tomorrow morning, but it's going to be sketchy. With the rest of the forecast, here is Abby Adeyemi. Morning, Abby.
Yeah, good morning, Marcy. I know that's not what a lot of Winnipeggers and Manitobans want to wake up to this morning. Alberta clipper coming your way, but we're tracking that into the western part of the province and into the central part of the province. Most areas in the south will definitely see this system come our way, but we're tracking it around the Dauphin and Riding Mountain area for now. Some areas, this system, is tracking it since conditions yesterday, Marcy. So it's predicting that some areas may get about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow.
That's us in Winnipeg,
Yes,
right?
that's us in Winnipeg. And then maybe towards the Port La Prairie area and then the Brandon area towards Dauphin, you might get more dump of snow your way. But it's kind of tricky, looking at the system. It's not that would really leave a lot of leftovers because the winds would also be coming around to whip it around. So look out for that. But for folks in the Interlake region, you're also like going to be feeling some of the snow come your way. And this would be a system we're tracking into Thursday morning. So be prepared for that. But for the folks around Dauphin Riding Mountain area, you should be seeing some. And it's not leaving us out for the Winnipeg area, the Red River, the Pembina Valley region. We'll definitely see the snow melt on contact with the pavement as we get into the day. So expect maybe messy and slushy conditions and also along the Trans-Canada Highway, you will be noticing that. Travel may become difficult later today into tomorrow with these heavy bands of snow moving into the region. So take note of that. But for Winnipeg right now, high, Marcy, for this time of the year is +8. I don't know where we're going to only get to 0 today, Marcy. So look out for that. It's more about the system coming our way today. We do have a high around 0 and +1 in some areas. But currently, clear conditions in Winnipeg. We're expecting a high of not 8, but 0.
All right, we'll get there. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
The drive, walk, and roll. Did you run in this morning, Corey?
I biked in this morning, actually. You know what? It was not great. Because all the stuff that was puddles like a day or two ago, now it's all just bumpy and slippery. So it's a lot of just slow rolling, hoping to not fall over. But otherwise the roads were fairly clear. But then all of a sudden there's just a patch of that. Other than that, though, yeah, it's pretty quiet out there on the road so far. It is a bit windy. You could feel it on your face this morning. A bit of a wind chill out there. But if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you do want to tell me what you're seeing out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Hey, Corey, stuck around in the studio for a second here. Do you arm wrestle ever?
Not now. I used to arm wrestle as a kid a lot more.
Like where?
I'll just like at your desk. Like I don't. Well, I was like I don't know. You just
you like throw down in school.
Yeah. It was like it was like a thing you do. I don't know. Like it's I hit puberty early, so I would win like quite a bit, like between grades 5 and 8, and then when all the kids caught up, and I just ended up being an average kid, I just started getting owned, and then that's when I stopped. So I'd be like, but I was like big and like.
Who knew this about you in your glory years?
Exactly.
Between
Yeah,
grades 5 and 8 when you were arm wrestling.
That's when I peaked.
Okay, shout out your school. Where were you doing this arm wrestling?
Sun Valley School.
Sun Valley School.
Well, in the late years, Sun Valley Elementary, and then Westgate in the early years, and then as soon as everyone else had mustaches, then it was over.
I have to say, I think that a lot of us are probably done that, right? Had the old arm wrestling competition. The ordeal's usually pretty casual, unless you're Corey, who's like a 3-year champ, apparently. But this usually might happen at, kitchen table, or maybe you throw down if you're out and about in a restaurant or a bar or something. But some people win hundreds, even thousands of dollars from arm wrestling matches. That is also what happened this past weekend in Winnipeg at Assiniboia Downs. This was part of the annual All Nations Tribal Days, and Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation hosted an arm wrestling tournament. One of the most well-known Canadian faces in this sport of arm wrestling was there. Devon Larratt is a world champion.
Amazing the growth of arm wrestling in Canada. You see it right across the country. And it was so great yesterday they hosted the kids classes. Okay, and it's the first tournament I've been to in a long time where they're actually paying the kids. I think a kid walked away yesterday with like $700. And that's great. That's amazing. A lot of talent coming now through the youth divisions. Especially the Dumas brothers, and hopefully you get to talk to these guys. We got a 15-year-old here today who's got a good chance of winning the Open Pro. I've loved arm wrestling my whole life. It's one of the most simple and one of the most accessible sports. Anybody can do it. There's basically no equipment required whatsoever. And you can do it anywhere, anytime, at any age. You can get better and better at it your whole life. And, you can get hurt in all sports, but arm wrestling, I mean, you're not going to get head trauma. You're going to be able to walk. So it's a very, very appealing sport. I have learned so much in my travels, going to different communities. I'm a huge supporter of the Indigenous communities. I've gotten to go out and see them, learn more. I've totally changed the way I think about this entire part of our nation's fabric. So wonderful. I think that there's so much that we can learn from community. And this is a beautiful event right in the heart of Canada, right in the center, bringing together all the parts of Canada into one celebration of sport and community.
So that was world champion of arm wrestling, Devon Larratt, who was in Winnipeg for this over the weekend. Now, he inspired a lot of young people to join the sport. Let's talk about Thomas Dumas, 15 years old, from Dauphin, Manitoba, moved to Alberton PEI when he was 11, is Red River Métis. Now, here's a clip of his conversation about his arm wrestling success with CBC Manitoba's Gavin Axelrod.
Started when I was 7 years old, right here at the Red River X. Since I started, I've loved it. I wanted to come out here. I seen Devin and Brian were going to be here. It's going to be an awesome tournament, and I wanted to compete here.
What's it mean for young arm wrestlers like yourself to get up close and personal with a guy like Devin?
It's so awesome. It's so inspirational. Devin's such a great guy. He's motivated me so much throughout my life, since I was a little kid all the way to now. I think all the way till I'm very old as well.
What are you competing in here?
I'm competing in the Indigenous category, 190 pounds down, as well as the open category, 190 pounds down, and the men's.
The Indigenous category, is that done?
Yes, it's all over. I won both arms.
You won both arms?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
And the open category, is that guys all your age, or is it
The open category, it's all seniors. Anyone can compete in it. There's some really good competitors. I'm super stoked for it. Super excited.
For people who are going to see this, how old are you?
I'm 15 years old.
So you're going to be competing against adults?
Yeah, all adults.
What's it like when you're up there?
It's very scary, very exciting. I love the feeling. I never get any feelings like this besides arm wrestling. I just love it so much.
So for people who don't know, how many tournaments and stuff have you won recently?
Throughout my career, I have 2 world championships, 10 nationals, and 17 provincials.
So you've won 10 nationals?
10 nationals.
Wow. Both arms? Or?
Yes, both arms.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you very much.
What is it about arm wrestling that's what it draws you to the sport?
I really like arm wrestling. The people are so great. Everyone is so amazing. And it's all on me. It's all my fault if I lose or win. So I can kind of control if I win or not.
I love how his enthusiasm, how excited he is. Both arms. Can we just have another moment for that? You heard my colleague, CBC's Gavin Axelrod, impressed by that too. In conversation there with Thomas Dumas, who's 15 years old, from Dauphin, arm wrestler. At Assiniboia Downs this weekend, as I mentioned, All Nations Tribal Days was on, and Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation hosted an arm wrestling tournament. You can check out video and more viz online at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House on CBC Listen and wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, what's that saying? Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. I guess in Manitoba, it would be a purple and pink sky because we've got a gorgeous sunrise coming up here, but we are expecting snow. 2 to 4 centimeters in Winnipeg, even more if you are through the western part of the province and central Manitoba. Expecting on that track about 15 to 30 centimeters to fall. Right now in Winnipeg, -6. Same with Brandon, and Thompson's -22 with a clear day ahead, and that's the cold spot. Well, speaking of the fire hose of news from America, today's a very serious day. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued deadlines before, but the one looming tonight calling on Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz has the world on edge. That is, of course, because Trump is threatening to destroy Iran's civilian infrastructure if it does not comply. Negotiations through third-party countries are reported to be ongoing, but Trump says Iran has not yet conceded enough. Christian Luprecht is here to set up a difficult day. He's professor at Royal Military College and Queen's University. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcia.
So far, what is Iran's reaction to all of this?
Well, they're putting forward their own maximalist demands, so it doesn't look like the regime is ready to cave anytime soon. They gave a 10-point plan to its Pakistani intelligence interlocutors. That plan basically has two broad objectives. One is to provide security guarantees for the regime, because the mediators are trying to achieve a ceasefire, but Iran has made it clear it's not going to give in to a ceasefire because it doesn't want to get bombed again in 6 months by Israel and the United States. So it wants some sustainable security guarantees and arrangement, and it wants a revenue stream to rebuild the country. And at the same time, the U.S. continues to insist on its maximalist demands of have Iran handing over its enriched uranium, stopping the missile program, stop funding militias, give the U.S. some control over uranium hydrocarbons, and a sustainable solution for the Strait of Hormuz. So you can see that those maximalist positions on both sides are difficult to reconcile, especially while you're being bombed.
I have to ask about Sunday morning, not Easter, but Easter Sunday morning, the tweet. What did you make of Trump's expletive-filled threat to Iran issued on Sunday?
So I think it reflects the mood in the White House over the last couple of weeks. That had already been reported, that Trump has not been pleasant to be around. I think Trump was sold by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that this was going to be a quick and easy win at low cost, and of course it turned out to be anything but. And I think Trump believed that he's defied the critics on Iran before, so he could defy the critics again. At the same time, I think the tweet sort of reflects willingness by Trump to stay the course and not to move away from his political objectives, and perhaps also a sense of confidence that this campaign, for all the criticism, is going better than, for instance, U.S. campaigns, say, the Gulf War or even the Iraq invasion, both in terms of U.S. losses as well as in terms of support from Gulf states that are behind the campaign by and large. So I think there's and these are statements that during a major conflict, we can't take any statement any government leader makes to take face value. They're always part of negotiations.
Even with one that comes in the middle of the night that's full of expletives, because I wonder whether or not it's just going to make the U.S. look silly and weaker because he looks like he just went off the rails because he's frustrated because they're not listening to him or something. I mean, it was really offensive and quite something.
So there's two ways to read that. So every listener, I think, should read The Art of the Deal. So his President Trump's infamous book,
which guides him in everything. Okay.
His negotiation strategy is to throw off your opponent, and in part to have your opponent think that he's crazy and he's incalculable. So the question is whether this is Trump trying to pursue his usual strategy, or whether the converse is true, that the Iranians are actually getting to Trump and that it is Trump who's now getting emotional as a result of the Iranians unwilling to make concessions. And I think the next 24 hours or this week will tell which one of the two.
So interesting, the conversation around it, of course. Let's talk about the rescue of the American airmen who would have been shot down in Iran. What stayed with you around that? Obviously, the president coming out to talk about that as well, and the military sharing now some of the details of that.
This risks becoming a major propaganda win for the Iranian regime. We know how that regime had previously dealt with U.S. embassy staff in 1979. We know how its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, deal with IDF soldiers that they captured dead or alive. This is a regime that, of course, shot down a civilian airliner with 85 Canadians on board, a regime that killed thousands of its own people earlier this year to hold on to power. So this colonel was at grave risk, propaganda risk, and also risk of personal harm. And so the Trump administration decided they were going to put every resource on trying to extract him. And of course, we know that they succeeded in that. It's also an important morale booster to service members in the region, because the U.S. military, one of its promises to the service members is that we will have your back. If you run into trouble, we will find you, we will get you, we will extract you. And I think with the current administration, there may have been some doubts how committed the U.S. is to that promise. And so it reinforces for service members that indeed the military will be there for them.
Just as a last question here, Christian, how are European allies in Canada responding to the latest developments in the war? What will you be watching for today on that front?
Well, I think Trump has shown time and again that he has Canada and European allies over a barrel At the same time, we do have some agency. I mean, as the External Affairs Commissioner for the EU, Katja Kallas, pointed out, we weren't consulted, so we're not about to run to your rescue. But we are, I think, to the best that we can, involved in trying to help negotiate some sort of arrangement here that will stop the carnage. And if nothing else, it should be a reminder to us all that we urgently need to reinvest in instruments of statecraft so that we're not effectively neutered and confronted with U.S. unilateralism that we have no way of containing and counterbalancing.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Always a pleasure, Marcia. Have a lovely morning.
You as well. That's Christian Leuprecht, a professor at the Royal Military College in Queen's University, with his analysis of the situation unfolding as we wait for that 8 o'clock deadline tonight. He's senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute. We reached him this morning in Kingston. We have local news coming up here at 6:30. Winnipeg starts with a clear sky this morning, and one traffic problem to tell you about. Portage Avenue at Westwood Drive. Traffic signals flashing red. There was an earlier collision there. Signal pole is kind of lying in the westbound lane. Left turn lane westbound. So use caution, treat that as an always stop, and hopefully crews will show up and get that cleaned up so it's not causing too much problem. If you want to call us with any issues out there on the commuter line this morning, whether it's on the highway, whether it's about snowy conditions, even if you want to call with an update that everything's looking good on your walk or your drive or your bike ride, you can let us know on the commuter line at 788-3093, 788-3093. Coming up, we will have business news coming your way, so stay tuned for that. Christly Ramlakan is back with her report, and so we'll have that after your CBC News from Winnipeg.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -6 and it is the calm before the snow. A snowfall warning in effect for parts of western Manitoba and the Interlake. In Winnipeg, periods of snow beginning this afternoon, windy with a high of 0 and then a couple to 4 centimeters expected tonight. People working with refugees in Winnipeg say a wave of Somalis is heading into Canada to avoid getting caught up in a U.S. immigration crackdown. U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in speeches against illegal migrants. CBC's Arturo Chang reports.
They flee from possible deportation and persecution.
Najib Warsameh says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing more Somalis north. The Winnipeg refugee advocate says he's heard from many who risk crossing the border over the winter as the U.S. government works to end protections letting them live and work in the States.
I don't want them in our country.
U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in tirades against migrants, a lot of whom live in Minnesota, south of Manitoba. Immigration lawyer Alistair Clark says while the U.S. is not safe, Canada is making getting asylum harder. Ottawa recently passed Bill C-12, which sets time limits for claims. Clark says many of his clients have been impacted.
Tightening the restrictions, in my view, that's not a good solution.
The federal government says the new law makes the system more sustainable and that there are still safeguards protecting asylum seekers facing serious harm. Arturo Chang, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, the clock is ticking down for Iran today. U.S. President Trump says if Iran doesn't open up the Strait of Hormuz by 7 Central Time, the U.S. will attack Iranian bridges and power plants. Iran's ambassador to Pakistan says negotiations for potential ceasefire are approaching a critical, sensitive stage. Meanwhile, Israel warns Iranian civilians to stay away from passenger trains and railways today, signaling a potential attack. Now, Winnipeg's Iranian community has a close eye on the war in their home country. Saeed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba. He says people are getting anxious as this war drags on.
It has changed from the beginning of the war. In the beginning, all people were happy. Now, after 6 weeks, people start getting worried. Many people expect a very fast war, that after elimination, the supreme leader, the regime will change very fast.
Ghavami says his greatest fear is the war ends without a plan to change the regime and bring in democracy. Heading back to Earth.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
Houston, we have you the same, and it is so great to hear from Earth again.
The Artemis 2 astronauts have successfully flown around the moon, a mission that will pave the way for humans to land again on the surface of the moon. Last night, U.S. President Donald Trump called the astronauts.
Artemis 2 are a modern day, you really are modern day pioneers, all of you, and one of them happens to be a neighbor. You know who that is, right? You have a special person over there, a neighbor, and we like our neighbor.
Trump, of course, referring to Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, one of the 4 astronauts. Now, more activities are planned before splashdown return off California on Friday, including a phone call with the International Space Station. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Well, it's not just spring in Manitoba. Election season is only 3 weeks away. CBC's Bartley Kivas explains.
2026 is an election year in the city. Candidates for mayor can register around 24 days from now, at the beginning of May. Registration allows them to raise and spend money on their campaigns. Candidates for council seats can register at the end of June. So far, half of councils committed to running again, including Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham. The election takes place October 28th. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 2-goal night for Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor in the third period on Prime as the Jets handed it to the Kraken. 6-2, the final, Winnipeg over Seattle. And it was a milestone night for Mark Scheifele, notching his 900th career point. Scheifele says it means a lot.
Obviously, very honored and humbled by it. So, it's pretty cool to think about. It'll probably take a little bit to sink in, but obviously it's very cool in my mind.
Now, the Jets are back on the road playing Thursday in St. Louis. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Okay, this might be old, but I've just seen it for the first time, Heather, that Kyle Connor is actually on a Kentucky Fried Chicken ad now.
Yes, he is. I've seen it. It's great.
They have like a young... Oh, yeah, they have the older Colonel, and then he's the younger Colonel, I think. Is that how it goes?
I think so, yeah. He's dressed kind of that way. Yeah, it's funny.
I know, it is funny. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Heather Wells in our news center this morning. Okay, 6:35 a.m. You're on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Great to be back with you after a long weekend. Thanks to Corey Funk, who sat in here yesterday and filled in for me. Let's get into this weather forecast. Abby Adiyemi is looking to look at all the regions right now.
Yeah, good morning, Marcy. We're tracking this major weather clipper bringing yellow level snow for warnings across a lot of regions in the southern part of the province this morning, stretching from the Parkland region all the way towards the Interlake region, the Manitoba Lakes, and of course we should be feeling some of the snow in the Red River and Pembina Valley region this morning. Hence the weather statement we have. We're looking out for a messy and slushy day ahead. Heavy bands of snow will definitely make travels challenging across the western lakes today before conditions will taper off sometime late Wednesday night. But forecast for Winnipeg and nearby areas at this time, increasing cloudiness with periods of snow expected to start around the noon period. That will turn windy with gusts all the way up to 60 at some points. Current temperatures right now, we're hovering between -6 and -8. Clear skies we have, but those cloudy conditions will roll in. Morning temperature is going to be staying around -8, and we're expecting a high of 0 today before we climb to about +1 tomorrow. Most regions in the south hovering between -6 to -11. In the Pembina Valley region, from Morden tracking it all the way towards Port de la Prairie, where we're going to see those snow bands really land. We're looking at -6 at this time. Some sunshine already making its way towards that part of the province. You do warm up to 2 degrees later in the day. In the Westman region, Brandon towards Neepawa, also -6 at that part of the province. Cloudy conditions here, high of 2 degrees. A risk of freezing rain later this evening. Then the snow will begin near the midnight period. A decent amount of snow coming your way. For the Parkland region, Dauphin all the way towards the Roblin area, -11 at this time. Clear, heavy snow beginning around the noon period. You only get to about -1 later in the day. And for the Interlake region, Gimli and nearby areas, we're tracking -15 at this time at some areas. Light snow also starting this afternoon. You warm up to about -1. Then as we cross over into the northern part of the province, taking off from the Power Flin Flon, we're looking at temperatures around minus 21, minus 14 at this time in that region. We're seeing minus 18 in some spot near Flin Flon. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today, high around minus 1. Thompson, Linley, Gillam. These regions will definitely see sunny conditions between minus 15 and minus 20s with highs close to 1 in the area. Tudula Lake, minus 16, expecting sunshine at this time. Highs will be around minus 6. And for Churchill in the York region, we're tracking minus 21. Mostly cloudy there. You only get to minus 11. The wind chill is still being felt in the Churchill area around minus 30 this morning. So kind of a messy winter comeback sometime in April. That's what we're looking at this morning. Heavy snow towards the Parkland and parts of the Interlake region. For the city, we might get to see a few and just a few lights around the noon period. We'll warm up to 0 later today.
Okay, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We do have some problems in traffic on Portage Ave, Corey?
Yeah, Portage Avenue and Westwood Drive. So the traffic signals there, they're flashing red. There was an earlier collision that caused that. So there's actually a signal pole laying on the westbound turn lane at Portage and Westwood. So treat that as a four-way stop. Maybe some backups there. We'd love to get some updates on that or anything else you're seeing. That really does seem to be the only problem out there. If you are walking or biking, though, know that there's a whole bunch of icy patches just out there that used to be puddles. Look out for that. If you have anything else you want to let me know about, you can give me a call. I can tell you, I'm sure you've probably noticed already if you do frequent the Forks or anywhere along the river, that the river is pretty high now. So the river trail from the legislature to the Forks is underwater right now. So you want to avoid that if that's a part of your commute as well. You can give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Let's get to Chris Lee Ramlakan, who's here now with some business news this morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with oil. The prices remain elevated. This is ahead of the deadline the U.S. President Donald Trump has set for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Just had a full interview about that, so that time is 8 o'clock tonight. What else can you tell us, though, as you're watching oil?
Yes, so oil prices have been seesawing this morning amid uncertainty about what will happen in the war in the Middle East and how long it will slow the global flow of oil and natural gas. So right now, prices are higher ahead of Trump's deadline for Iran to reopen the strait to all shipping traffic or risk its power plants and bridges being bombed. So the international benchmark Brent crude is around $110 per barrel, and that's still well above its price of roughly $70 from before the war. And the North American benchmark West Texas Intermediate is higher, around $114 per barrel. And yesterday, Iran rejected the latest ceasefire proposal and instead said it wants a permanent end to the war. And as I'm sure you just heard, we're definitely going to be watching for what's going to happen tonight.
Yeah. Let's stay on the price of energy this morning. In your report here, we're seeing more fuel surcharges from companies as well, right?
Yes, that's right. So the latest is from WestJet. The airline is introducing an additional $60 fee on companion voucher bookings, an RBC MasterCard perk that allows cardholders to bring a second passenger on a round trip for a reduced fare. The surcharge takes effect tomorrow. So WestJet says the surcharge is temporary, but will remain in place until jet fuel prices return to normal levels. And a spokesperson says fuel is the largest contributor to airline operating costs. So the airline is also adjusting its schedule to address higher fuel costs, including consolidating flights on lower demand routes and adjusting the travel period for seasonal offerings. And WestJet says it has reduced capacity by about 1% this month and 3% for next month. So if you're looking to book a flight through WestJet, you'll probably want to, look out for that. And experts say WestJet is among multiple Canadian airlines that have been scrambling to cover costs. And it's not the only industry charging more. Amazon is adding a fuel surcharge for Canadian and U.S. sellers starting April 17th. So the 3.5% surcharge will apply to sellers who outsource packing and shipping to Amazon fulfillment warehouses.
And finally, let's switch gears here because you've got a good news story here. Well, actually, you have two left, but this one's about women's sports being on a winning streak. What are the details this morning?
Yes, that's right. So since 2022, investors in women's sports have grown about 227% annually on average, according to consulting firm McKinsey. So financial backers are interested because, well, fans are interested. So last year, the WNBA broke its single season attendance record with a month left to spare. Last month, a record 63,000 fans showed up to a National Women's Soccer League game in Denver. And just on Saturday night, a professional women's hockey league game sold out at Madison Square Garden. So McKinsey projects just the U.S. women's sports market will generate about $2.5 billion in annual revenue for rights holders by 2030. And that amounts to 16% annual growth, which is roughly triple that of men's sports. And the current National Women's Soccer League media rights deal is worth 40 times what it was, what the previous one was. And the new WNBA deal will bring in more than triple what its prior agreement did. But, despite all of this recent growth, revenue, of course, from women's sports still makes up less than 2% of the total U.S. sports market.
Wait till the future, generation after generation, that number is just going to grow. It's exciting. And now, finally, why are sponsors pulling out of a large music festival in London?
Well, this is over Kanye West, who now goes by Ye, headlining the Wireless Festival. So Ye is scheduled to perform for around 150,000 attendees in mid-July. However, he has drawn widespread criticism and disapproval in recent years for his anti-Semitic actions and remarks. Now, he made an apology in January attributing his actions to bipolar disorder, and he has offered to meet with the UK Jewish community as calls mount for him to be ditched from the lineup. The organizer of the festival is standing by the rapper, emphasizing forgiveness and second chances. But yeah, sponsors like Pepsi and Diageo have withdrawn from the festival, and other sponsors, including Budweiser and PayPal, are under pressure to withdraw as well. Now, the British government says Ye should absolutely not perform at the festival. But Ye has been trying to turn his career around. He recently sold out 2 shows at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, earning him $33 million. One of his shows earned more than $18 million in ticket sales, one of the highest grossing single shows in live music history. And corporations, most of whom distanced themselves before, are now willing to do business again. So, for example, Spotify has put songs from his latest album on its top playlists.
All right, Crystal Lee, thanks for your report today.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Lee joins us every day. Crystal Lee Ramlicam with Business News on CBC. Well, it's hard to get motivated, folks. We're all waiting for the sun and nicer weather. And if you like to maybe walk through the park, you can do that now, but you're still going to get the chill from the snowbanks. And guess what? We're getting more snow. Normal's 8 degrees. You won't see that today. -6 right now. We'll be at 0 in Winnipeg, and we're expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. Well, next on Information Radio, you might recall that in 2022, CBC Manitoba's I-Team came out with some data that they found. More than 23% of personal care home residents at that time were prescribed antipsychotic medication without a diagnosis of psychosis in the first 3 months of 2022. Now, that data was provided by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. So what it amounted to was nearly a quarter of Winnipeg care home residents given antipsychotic drugs with no diagnosis. Now, this is tied to something coming up next on the show because long-term care homes all across the country are using antipsychotic drugs far more than they should. It is one of the findings in a recent report now from the Canadian Institute of Health Information, or CIHI. There are also other conclusions in the report that are getting, though, less attention, things that can make a big difference to the lives of vulnerable people. This morning, Mary Jane Hampson has more. She's a CBC Radio health care columnist.
Now there's a national target to move from a national rate of 24% of potentially inappropriate prescribing of these drugs down to 15%. For people with dementia, they can be loud, physically aggressive, or wander aimlessly, and generally difficult to manage. Antipsychotic medications can act like sedatives. They've been called major tranquilizers because they work very quickly to calm agitation. They're great in helping if you suffer from delusions and hallucinations. But if you don't suffer from psychosis, and not all people with dementia do, these drugs can be really harmful because they cause adverse reactions, cognitive decline, and even the risk of death. So when these drugs are given to manage behaviors, or to put it more bluntly, to make people easier to manage, it's an indicator of poor quality of care that's more geared to being helpful to staff than being good for the resident. If nursing homes were truly person-centered, pacing wouldn't be an activity to curtail. Someone would take the resident's hand and offer to walk with them. There would be no schedule when food is available. Imagine that, residents being able to eat whenever they felt like it. Go to the kitchen and open the fridge door like we all do at home. If a resident is too restless to sit down for a meal, they'd be offered high-protein buffet-style finger foods to graze on instead. Hallways wouldn't be empty and hollow, but have stations for everyday activities, some hand tools and things to take apart and reassemble for people who love being in their workshop, a cosmetic station and mirror with hats and scarves for dressing up, an area with bowls and utensils and ingredients for those whose identity it is to cook for their family, or a place for them to fold clothes, or organize a cupboard, or score math tests, or shop for items in their cart. And there would never be sedation for nighttime wandering. If a resident is awake at 3 a.m, they'd be offered a warm snack, a hand massage, or a quiet walk until they're ready to rest. It all takes time, and it does mean having more staff in nursing homes than we currently fund for, but not as many as you might think. And there is a tremendous return on investment. Doing these things will likely increase the risk of falls in nursing homes sometimes, but it will also greatly increase the happiness and contentment and joy that residents experience in the course of their day. And in those nursing homes that have shifted to this approach to resident care, the rate of prescribing of antipsychotic drugs has fallen by 68%. There was a 90% reduction in behaviors like screaming and pacing. Unintended resident weight loss was reduced by 20%, and in some workplaces, they saw as much as a 90% drop in sick time after the culture shift experienced by staff. So everyone wins.
So a lot of information coming there from Mary Jane Hampton, a CBC radio healthcare columnist, with some big numbers there at the end. The research she was referencing was published, if you want to look at it, in the Canadian Institute of Health Information, or CIHI. It came out in February, in fact, of this year. It was called Insights on Safety, Wellbeing and Staffing in Long-Term Care. It is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Well, let's turn our attention to federal politics right now. It is a big week for the federal Liberal Party. It kicks off their national convention in Montreal, or they do rather, on Thursday. After that, there are 3 key by-elections in Ontario and Quebec, and the results just might mean a majority government in Parliament for Prime Minister Mark Carney. Ryan Tumulty's here to set up the week that will be, and he, of course, political reporter with the Toronto Star. Hi, Ryan.
Hi there.
So what are the issues actually at the upcoming Liberal convention? They're flying pretty high right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are policy debates, as there always are at these conventions. So a couple of things. There's a debate, I know, on there's about 20 policy resolutions. I know there's one on, banning social media for teens, anyone under the age of 16, apps like Instagram and TikTok. There's a lot of healthcare debates on the convention floor. We're going to see a debate around the notwithstanding clause and whether or not the federal government should prevent provinces from using it through one of its old powers called disallowance. So lots of, sort of policy debates, but I think this convention is going to be a lot about the politics as well. This is a party that looked to be headed to an electoral defeat, a massive one. Just maybe 18 months ago, and is now on the verge of a majority government. So a certain amount of politics mixed in with that policy for sure.
So let's talk about the possibility of a majority government. It's coming because of next Monday, 3 by-elections running in the East. What do you think we're going to see out of these races?
Yeah, so there's 3 races here. 2 in Toronto, University Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest. These are both very safe Liberal seats. They won them with more than double their opponents in the last election. They've won them consistently since 2015 at least. So they are in good shape in those elections. If they lose either of those elections, it would just be an absolute political earthquake. The real race that I think people are going to be watching is Terrebonne outside of Montreal. This is a race that was decided by a single solitary vote in the last election. That doesn't usually happen. It was overturned by the Supreme Court because of some issues with mail-in ballots. And so they are running it again. But every Liberal I've talked to in the past few weeks has described this as a toss-up, has described this as a race that will go right down to the wire again. This had been a Bloc Québécois seat for decades prior. So this was a big Liberal win last year, but it's really uncertain if they can hold on to it.
They need to win 2 to have a majority. Is that correct? So they can afford to lose 1.
So they can afford to lose 1, but if they do lose 1, that's 172 seats. That would give them a majority, but only with the Speaker's vote. And that's a little bit dicey because the Speaker can't always vote with the Liberals. He can probably help them survive confidence votes, but there is a tradition to how the Speaker votes, and it's not along party lines. So even though the Speaker is a Liberal, he's not necessarily going to vote with the party every time. And that will complicate things for them. So I think they're really hoping for this last seat for 173 that will get them over the finish line.
With that potential sitting there for a majority Liberal government, what do you think the discussions will be at the Convention on Party Policy and Strategy? Will they be looking at some things, through that lens?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the way the government has run over the last year, I think they've been looking at both the long term and the short term. So a lot of what Mark Carney has been pushing is long term. We're talking about major projects. We're talking about new trade deals. None of those pay dividends or show up results for Canadians overnight. Canadians don't necessarily see those things in their pocketbook right away. So that's why the Liberals have also done short term things. If you think about the GST cut, the GST rebate boost that we saw this year, that's a short term fix. So I think if the Liberals land on that majority government, we'll see less of those short-term fixes and more long-term fixes so that they can, and they'll have that time to make it work because they won't face an election call, certainly not a snap one.
And just in our last minute here before you go, obviously some of the Liberal seats this year came because of floor crossing. Do you think that there's an appetite or that this might happen in the country, that we're going to have a national debate on the practice happening at all? I mean, it's been part of our system forevermore, right?
Yeah, and I think it will stay that way. I absolutely know people find it distasteful. I know there is a debate. I'm sure that debate will continue. But I would also say that, the system as it is structured right now puts an awful lot of power in the hands of party leaders, be it the prime minister or the opposition leaders. They have a lot of authority over their own individual MPs, and floor crossing is kind of the card that Liberals can pull, that individual backbench MPs can pull. So I'm not sure that what our system needs is more power in the hands of party leaders, and that is one of the benefits of floor crossing, is that it breaks up that power a little bit. So that's certainly something, to think about in this discussion.
Ryan, thank you very much for your time today.
All right, thank you.
It's going to be a busy week. Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star. 3 minutes to 7 o'clock now. If you had a long weekend and you're just getting back at it, -6 mainly clear in Winnipeg, cloudy in Brandon. Thompson's -22, looking for sun, and snowfall is expected across a lot of Manitoba. 2 to 4 centimeters in Winnipeg. The big area up around 15 to 30 centimeters is going to be an Alberta clipper that's going to affect the western part of Manitoba and up through the central region. So Gimli right through riding Green Mountain, over to Fisher River, up to Hecla, and over to Erickson as well. So that's what's coming in the weather. We have a problem in traffic here in the city of Winnipeg. Portage Avenue and Westwood Drive, signals flashing red. There was an earlier collision there. There may also be a signal pole lying in the westbound lane, turn lane. So be careful. Treat it as an always stop and take it easy. Call us if you have an update, 788-3093. In the next hour of Information Radio, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen and his 3 American crewmates ventured farther into space than anyone ever before. We're going to talk to a Manitoba astronomer about the record-breaking Artemis 2 mission around the moon. Maybe you were glued to your TV yesterday or your radio. Also, we're going to hear a special report about a group home worker who helped look after an 18-year-old homicide victim before she died. This worker believes a lack of consequences and support for youth and child and family services care may have further endangered the teen. CBC's Rosanna Hempel has a special report for us in the next hour. Heather Wells now with your headlines.
A refugee advocate says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing many Somalis north. The Salvation Army has noticed that more than half of the refugees who stayed at the Winnipeg shelter in the past 6 months have come from the U.S. And it's not only springtime in Winnipeg, it's also nearing election time. In a little more than 3 weeks, mayoral candidates can register to run in this fall's civic election. The election is October 28th. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
Coming up, World Reports, national and international news. Stay with us here on CBC on your Tuesday morning. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Talk to you after the national news.
Shoppers would be able to buy food closer to what it actually costs without all the markups from private companies.
I'm Dave Seglins. Toronto City Council has voted to test out public grocery stores in some parts of the city. They already exist in many parts of the world. How well will they tackle food insecurity? That's coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. The Iranian regime is calling on students and athletes to form human chains around power plants, a dangerous move aimed at protecting Iran's infrastructure. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will bomb those sites just hours from now if the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen. Megan Williams is in Dubai with more on how the Persian Gulf is bracing for Trump to follow through on his threat.
Donald Trump has been explicit. He says every bridge in Iran will be decimated and every power plant will be left burning if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened. Iran's response has been defiant. State media is urging citizens to go to the power plants and physically put their lives on the line to protect them. Israel is also warning Iranians in Farsi to stay away from trains, signaling that rail networks are now a target. Tehran has published its own list of tit-for-tat targets across the Gulf, bridges in Kuwait, Jordan, and here in the UAE. They're also threatening the King Fayed Causeway, the link between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, which houses the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. Saudi Arabia is taking the threat seriously. With its own energy facilities under intense attack this morning, it closed the causeway overnight before reopening it. Iran expert Ali Vaez says of Iran,
they can basically create a scorched earth situation in the rest of the Gulf, as well as in Israel. If the Houthis come in, they close the access to the Red Sea. About 2/3 of Saudi and Emirati energy that is now getting to Asian markets will be gone.
Another major fear here in the Gulf is water. These countries rely almost entirely on desalinated water, which requires electricity. An Iranian strike on power infrastructure could knock out water supplies for millions of people within days. Megan Williams, CBC News, Dubai.
The man heralded as Australia's most decorated living soldier is now charged with war crimes. Ben Robert Smith served in Afghanistan between 2006 and 2012. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for his service. He now faces 5 war crimes murder charges. Police say Robert Smith was involved in the deaths of people in Afghanistan who were not taking part in hostilities when they were killed. Chrissy Barrett is Australia's Federal Police Commissioner.
It will be alleged the victims were detained, unarmed, and were under the control of ADF members when they were killed. It will be alleged the victims were shot by the accused or shot by subordinate members of the ADF in the presence of and acting on the orders of the accused.
3 newspapers previously published allegations Robert Smith murdered Afghan civilians. He failed in his attempt to sue those papers for defamation. Alberta's separatist movement and lawyers for Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation will be in court this morning. A 3-day hearing is about to begin. It will consider whether a separatist referendum violates Indigenous treaty rights. The CBC's Joe Horwood takes us through the arguments.
Whenever it comes to treaty, then we have to do something.
Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation Chief Sheldon Sunshine says their fight isn't necessarily with separatists, but with government.
Our treaty was signed with the Crown. Canada has a responsibility to uphold that.
Sunshine says the lawsuit was prompted by the Alberta government's passing of Bill 14, which removed the requirement for a referendum question to align with the Constitution. The First Nation says separation would violate treaty rights enshrined in Section 35 of the Constitution Act.
This is against Alberta and the Chief Electoral Officer for allowing that unconstitutional question. And of course, we name Canada to see where they are in all of this.
There are 2 ways a referendum gets on the ballot. One, with a successful citizen petition.
Or the provincial government, whichever way we decide to do that.
That's separatist leader Mitch Sylvester speaking on a podcast last month. While he's not confident his initiative will survive today's hearing, he expects the question will still be on the ballot.
I would absolutely expect it to go forward.
Should the injunction be denied, Chief Sunshine says there will be a lot of work to be done ahead of a possible referendum. Joe Horwood, CBC News, Calgary.
A Vancouver mining company is confirming 9 of its workers kidnapped in Mexico are dead. Vizsla Silver says only 1 of the 10 employees taken in January remains missing. The workers were abducted in Sinaloa State, a region torn apart by cartel infighting. Global Affairs says no Canadians were among those taken. Mexican authorities are investigating the company's safety protocols. In Winnipeg, refugee support groups say they're seeing more Somalis who have fled the United States trying to avoid a U.S. immigration crackdown. Some say they were targeted by ICE after the U.S. president singled out Somalis in recent tirades. But as Arturo Chang reports, those who do make it across the border face a complex set of rules here in Canada.
They flee from possible deportation and persecution.
Najib Warsameh says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing more Somalis north. The Winnipeg refugee advocate says he's heard from many who risk crossing the border over the winter as the U.S. government works to end protections letting them live and work in the States.
They are targeted because of their ethnicity, as they are Somalis. They cannot work, they cannot stay there.
I don't want them in our country.
U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in tirades against migrants, a lot of whom live in Minnesota, south of Manitoba. According to a Salvation Army shelter in Winnipeg, more than half of the refugees that stayed there over the past 6 months came from the States.
I hear stories almost every day about the atrocities and human rights violations in the United States.
Immigration lawyer Alistair Clark says while the U.S. is not safe, Canada is making getting asylum harder. Ottawa recently passed Bill C-12, which sets time limits for claims. The bill has been criticized by human rights groups like Amnesty International. Clark says many of his clients have been impacted.
Tightening the restrictions from individuals in the United States who are trying to come to Canada, in my view, that's not a good solution.
The federal government says asylum claims continue to drop, that the new law makes the system more sustainable, and that there are still safeguards protecting asylum seekers facing serious harm, even if their claim is rejected. Arturo Chang, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arriving in Hungary. He's there to show his support for Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Because the president loves you, and so do I, because you're such an important part
of what has made Europe strong and prosperous.
Hungarians vote on Sunday, and Orban has been trailing in most polls. He is a longtime ally of President Trump, a supporter of the MAGA worldview, a regular critic of the EU's migration policies, and has been accused of leading an authoritarian government since coming to power in 2010. As one of the host cities for the FIFA World Cup, Vancouver is hoping to show itself off to the world. But human rights advocates worry what that will mean for people living on the streets. As Tanya Fletcher reports, they fear a repeat of how Vancouver dealt with people who are homeless during the 2010 Olympics.
We have a huge vulnerable population within the FIFA bubble zone.
Vancouver Councillor Pete Fry is urging the city to make sure human rights are protected during the World Cup. FIFA requires host cities to have an action plan ahead of time. Vancouver has a draft version, but there are concerns it's too vague at this point.
We don't want to see massive displacement. We don't want to see people put at risk. We have people who rely on overdose prevention sites and shelters, and they don't have anywhere else to go.
We're very concerned about what this is going to look like, and it's really all pointing to poor planning.
Chantel Spicer is with the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. She points out co-host city Seattle has rolled out an emergency plan that includes 500 new shelter beds. And without concrete measures in Vancouver, she fears a repeat of what happened during the 2010 Winter Games, including what she calls warehousing, when the unhoused were pushed out of high-traffic tourist areas. And
large segments of the downtown east side and Chinatown communities were given kind of like one-way bus tickets, one-way ferry tickets out of Vancouver to clean up Vancouver. We've heard a lot of community members who were here during the 2010 Olympics say that that is something that they absolutely fear happening again.
Vancouver's preliminary Human Rights Action Plan says people will still be allowed to set up temporary overnight shelters in parks, but must clear out during the day. The final draft will be released in May. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're enjoying World Report via podcast, please follow us and tell a friend. It helps spread the word. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Well, it is the quote that I know is ringing in my head this Tuesday morning. It's so great to hear from Earth again. Quote, ultimately, will we always choose Earth? We will always choose each other. What a moment from one of the astronauts aboard Artemis 2 in the Orion. We're going to talk more about yesterday, all of the amazing events as humans ventured farther than ever before from Earth. So stay tuned. We're going to have that conversation this hour on the show through a Manitoba lens. In addition, this hour on the show, coming up at 10 to 8, quite a serious story to share. A group home worker who helped look after an 18-year-old homicide victim before she died has spoken out to CBC. She believes a lack of consequences and support for youth and child and family services may have further endangered the teen. And we're going to hear why she says that. This is coming up in a special report before 8 from the CBC's Rosanna Hempel. So stay tuned for that. Right now, 11 minutes after 7 a.m., and Heather Wells is here with other news headlines developing. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's Iranian community has a close eye on the war in their home country, especially as Donald Trump's deadline about tonight and infrastructure, the possibility of bombing it is coming up. Saeed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba, and he says people are getting anxious as that war drags on. His greatest fear, he says, is it will end without a plan to change the regime and bring in democracy. Well, October may feel like it's far off, but for people wanting to run in the upcoming civic election in Winnipeg, it's almost time to launch their bids. Mayoral candidates can register to run starting in May. The election is October 28th. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
And now into the weather we go with Abby Adeyemi.
Yes, Marcy, we're tracking this Alberta clipper coming into the western and central parts of the province. We're looking at the Interlake region region and the Parkland region really seeing a lot of the system come your way. We're anticipating, not like today, but once the system moves through, we're looking at 2 to 15 centimeters.
Okay.
So 2 to 15.
Just on behalf of all Manitobans, come on, man!
I know, but that's why I said I don't want to dump the 15 on you. Just know you might get to some areas will see 2 to 4, some areas will see 5 to 15.
Just people can turn their radios off. But what are we supposed to be at this morning? Like we're supposed to be at like above zero, right?
The seasonal for this time of the year is +8,
and we're going to be
most of the regions are going to struggle to just get above zero today.
Okay, where's the bright spot? Not till next week, right?
Yeah, not till next week, Marcy.
All right. Now, we're not in the eye of this, though, because it's through western and central Manitoba.
Yes, true. Temperature slightly warmer in this part of the province. We're just going to track about maybe 2 to 4 in the Winnipeg area, but you will be noticing some action as you get along the Trans-Canada Highway once the system comes your way. You know, those are always the trouble spots when we have this band of snow moving through the region. You'll see limited visibility and whipping snow with the wind speed building up. But for Winnipeg, -6 at this time. We saw the sunshine. Most of the northern part of the province, we're seeing sunshine there all the way towards Churchill this morning, though temperature in Churchill around -20. Wind chill still -30 in that part of the province. But the main action today, we're bracing for the Alberta Clipper. Heavy bands of snowfall really coming our way. Watch out for folks in the Parkland region, checking on them.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We're all disgusted.
I had symbolically put my kid's snowsuit in the basement, like packed it away.
Okay.
Because it should be that way.
Yeah.
And then I had to, it hurt. It actually hurt to touch as I grabbed it out of the basement yesterday to send it to daycare. It was awful.
We have one thing in traffic going on?
Yeah, it's really just Portage and Westwood this morning. So there was a collision earlier. So Portage Avenue, Westwood and Westwood Drive, traffic signals are flashing red, and there's a signal pole laying on the westbound turn lane on Portage. So treat that as a four-way stop. That's really the only issue I've heard of so far. Might be some slippery bits here and there from former puddles on the sidewalks or bike lanes. But if you do see anything else, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as we have all been sharing all around the world, sharing this, humans have ventured farther into space than ever before. At 12:57 p.m. yesterday, the crew of 4 astronauts in the Orion capsule on NASA's Artemis 2 mission passed the record of 400,171 kilometers from Earth, set by Apollo 13 in April 1970. Also yesterday, a touching crew moment as Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen asked NASA to dedicate 2 names for craters on the moon.
Cabin of integrity here as we surpass the furthest distance humans have ever traveled from planet Earth. We do so in honoring the extraordinary efforts and feats of our predecessors in human space exploration. We will continue our journey even further into space before Mother Earth succeeds in pulling us back to everything that we hold dear. But we, most importantly, choose this moment to challenge this generation and in the next to make sure this record is not long-lived.
Thank you, Integrity, and congratulations to you and the rest of the Artemis 2 team.
Our science team helped us out with a couple of relatively fresh craters on the moon that have not been previously named, and our crew would like to propose a couple of potential names for those items or those areas. And we spent a bit of time this morning looking out the window, and we're able to see them now both with our naked eye and through the long lens, and so we feel this is a good time to send this down. The first one we'd like to suggest is a named crater in honor of our great spacecraft Integrity. And the second one, and especially meaningful for this crew, a number of years ago we started this journey in our close-knit astronaut family, and we lost a loved one. And there's a feature in a really neat place on the moon, and it is on the near side, far side boundary. And so we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol, the spouse of Reed, the mother of Katie and Ellie, and we would like to call it Carol. And you spell that Carroll.
Touching, right? And just amazing to hear humans that far being so, well, human. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen speaking from the Orion capsule and NASA's Artemis 2 mission. The names of those craters are a tribute to their spaceship, as you heard, Integrity, and to Carol, the late wife of fellow astronaut and crew member Reed Wiseman. Well, we have lots to talk about with Scott Young, who's been sitting in studio listening here. Planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum, and obviously has been following the mission closely, as many of us have. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what has stayed with you? I mean, what a day of events. We can hear you okay there, Scott. Yeah. If you want to hear yourself, you can turn up the little knob there. Yeah. What stayed with you? I mean, there were so many things yesterday. Like, what are you feeling right now?
Oh, tired mostly. I was up most of the night waiting for some of the pictures to come back down, and of course I was watching the entire flyby and doing a live broadcast, doing some interpretation and stuff. It was just a bit of a whirlwind, and now I'm kind of like, wait, is it over? I mean, the mission is still going, but the big part, the milestones have all been passed. And that was the thing that really stuck with me. It wasn't the pictures of the moon or the science or the records or things like that. It was these 4 super excited nerds looking out the window and just running out of wows to express what they were seeing and feeling.
I love that we're all reminded that this is an emotional journey for these 4 human beings. I mean, few of us, I really on one hand can imagine, right, what being cut off that far. I mean, now there's 4 people in the world.
Yeah.
Who can know what that's like, those 40 minutes in blackout. What must that have been like?
Yeah, I bet the Earth looks way different on the way back coming home after that experience when they're behind the moon. They can't see the moon, or they can't see the Earth. They can't contact anyone. They're completely alone in the universe other than the 4 of them. And I mean, that's what they train for, to be independent and to work as a team and things like that. But that's all intellectual. The emotional side of things, I imagine, is just going to be amazing. Like when they splash down and smell fresh air, you're home.
Yeah.
Nothing's like home.
Let's talk about the science and geek out a little bit here. So what is staying with you around what the astronauts have said, maybe about the brief descriptions we had from their human eyes about the colors on the moon surface, or maybe even what you've taken from some of the photos you're seeing?
Yeah, well, the images that are coming back, there's only a few of them so far, but they're incredible detailed images. Now, we have pictures already from robot spacecraft of a lot of these areas. So it's not, the picture isn't the thing, but the descriptive term, because it's amazing how the human eye sees things that the camera doesn't. Even though the camera is more sensitive and more detailed, we can process, our brains just process the images so much better. And so they're talking about seeing different colors and shades on the moon, and being able to see the 3D nature of the terrain, how rugged it is, and how, like, there's no flat spaces on certain parts of the moon at all. Like, you wouldn't want to land there or live there or work there, because you'd be up and down mountains all the time. And then what really surprised me was the colors, like not just grays and browns and things like that, but they were seeing shades of blue and shades of green. Those are colors we think of as like Earth colors, right? And yet those are visible there on the moon. So,
what does it mean that a Canadian's on board, do you think?
Oh, well, it's huge. I mean, the Apollo missions in the 70s inspired a whole generation of engineers and scientists, and the world we live in was built by the people that watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon and said, hey, that's cool. And so now we have that same inspirational moment with the addition of, well, it's not just our neighbors to the south that do this. We don't have to go to school and then move. We can do space stuff and really exciting stuff right here in Canada. You can even be an astronaut and fly around the moon. I never thought that would happen. I always thought in my lifetime, moon flights will be so rare that it's always going to be whatever country is paying for the main bill, right? So to see Jeremy go, and we know that we have one more Canadian flight on a future Artemis mission, and I'm holding out for his backup, Jenny Gibbons, who did a great job this mission, to be the first Canadian to walk on the moon. That's what I'm hoping for. We don't know, but
let's talk about future missions. So the goal of this mission was what? To get the farthest and to see the back dark side of the moon?
Actually, the main goal was just to make sure the spacecraft worked, and so they had to take it out on a test drive. And so you go far enough that you know that everything's working, and you have enough time to test the engines. And as everybody has heard, they had trouble with the space toilet the first day. And
I know, which sounds like people could smile about it, but that would be terrible if you were one of those humans on board.
Yeah, if you've ever lived in a camper van or something like that and couldn't go outside, it's not great.
Annoying, but not going to be, not going to ruin the mission.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a bunch of other things, the climate control and stuff, and just some things that will improve the spacecraft. So really, that was the main job. The fact that we went around the moon and set a record and got some great pictures was kind of gravy from a science point of view. But the next mission, Artemis 3, will dock with the newly built lunar landers. There's 2 of them in construction, and that'll happen just here in Earth orbit. And again, a test flight, make sure everything works. Because once you go to the moon and try to land, everything has to work perfectly from there on for you to get home.
Let's talk about the record they broke. So for those listeners that haven't been sort of nerding out and following this, which I have, as you have, but let's take us back to sort of the Apollo 13.
Yeah, so Apollo 13, the famous movie with Tom Hanks, and it's the one that, Houston, we have a problem. And so instead of landing on the moon, they did a free return trajectory. They slingshotted around the moon and came back without landing. And so that actually took them the farthest away from Earth, because the other missions that landed didn't have to go around. And so that was 400,000 kilometers and change. And so yesterday, the guy who set that record, Jim Lovell, called them on the spacecraft and handed them the torch ceremonially. And then they made it to 406,000 kilometers. But as Jeremy was saying, that's not a record that will last very long. Hopefully it won't last longer than about a year, because we'll be sending rockets farther.
Regularly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's really like live Star Trek. Like that's exactly what we're watching. Yeah. And I love the simplicity and the beauty of, like I said before, the four human beings who are encouraged to describe, not just what they're seeing, not just photograph, document, and be the astronaut, but be the human, right?
Yeah.
Feel the moment.
Exactly.
What to you is the most important technological change that we've seen that will make these missions moving forward that more successful and more frequent?
Well, I mean, they're working on the rockets, they're working on all that kind of stuff. I think the main thing is there was live video the whole time. We got to sit, we were in the seat watching. Like
crazy.
The Apollo days, we had to wait for the movie film to get back to Earth and be developed. There was just a little bit of TV and that was it. So that's huge, because that means that we all get to experience and be inspired and participate. And there were citizen scientists here on the Earth working with NASA to do like mission objectives as well. Like we can all get involved in this, which is really, really cool. And I think it's a time right now we need that ray of hope. We just heard the weather forecast and it wasn't great, right? I really wanted to, I was excited about the fact that we have this hopeful moment of, look, Star Trek future, maybe it's not that far away.
Let's just last, I guess, before you go this morning, I'm wondering, some might be still wondering why, even though you said this was they're testing out the vessel. It's like a piloting this, see if it works. Is that why they're not landing on the moon? People might be wondering, why didn't they land?
Yeah, well, there was 2 reasons. First of all, the companies that are building the landers haven't finished yet. So they're literally, the lander isn't built. And they didn't want to wait another, number of years. But also, it's a risk thing. You're in a spaceship that you've never flown it before with people on board. You want to make sure that the engine will work to come back. And if you're landing on the moon, there's a whole bunch of more engine burns and life support and opening hatches and all that stuff that we haven't done yet.
Got it.
So you want to make sure that if there's going to be a problem, you're going to get home safely.
Small steps before bigger steps, for mankind,
that's right.
So to speak. All right, thank you very much for being here. So exciting.
Always a pleasure. Yeah, this is great.
Scott Young with us live, planetarium astronomer over at the Manitoba Museum. It is 7:26 a.m. You're with Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. Paul McGowan's here with sports. Hey there, Paul.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's bring it back down to earth and talk about the Jets getting a win last night to remain in the wild card race.
Yeah, a fairly dominant performance last night, too. 6-2 over the Seattle Kraken. And as you said, an important win in that wild card race because every team the Jets are chasing right now are also earning points. And so with the win, the Jets remain 3 back of LA, and they do still need to leapfrog San Jose and Nashville. Standings aside, though, last night, a milestone game for Mark Scheifele with a second period assist. He earned career point number 900.
Everyone that's been in my life, throughout the hockey years, family obviously is big, and it means a lot. It's obviously, very honored and humbled by it. So it's pretty cool to think about. It'll probably take a little bit to sink in, but obviously it's very cool in my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll take, maybe the next 5 games to sink in once this playoff race is over. That race continues on Thursday, a sort of rare midweek 2-day break for the Jets. They're back in action on Thursday facing the Blues.
Last night, let's go to baseball next. We saw a World Series rematch between the Jays and the Dodgers.
And on the one hand, it's, nice to have this very quick World Series rematch. But on the other hand, it's April, it's cold outside, and teams are still finding their footing. And that last bit very much applies to the Jays, who got swept in Chicago over the weekend and then face-planted last night against the Dodgers, a 14-2 final for LA. Here's manager John Schneider on the lopsided final score.
A loss is a loss. You got to move past it. And at the whole thing, you got to get the offense going. Feels like there's been bases loaded in almost every game with 2 outs, and you need someone to get the big hit. I mean, you can't rely on Vlad or George or whoever it is. You got to kind of get that hit and kind of pop that balloon, if you will. It was a tough night overall, from the mound to the batter's box.
Yeah, in the batter's box, the Jays are not getting the clutch hits that they got last year. And on the mound, Max Scherzer appeared to leave early with an injury, which would be trouble given how many injuries to starting pitchers the Jays are dealing with already. We found out after the game, Marcy, that that was the plan all along, for Scherzer to have a shorter outing to sort of help deal with some tendonitis in his forearm. And, that would have been good news to have before we all collectively freaked out about Blue Jays pitching. The Jays still have 2 more games at home to save face against the Dodgers. They'll send Kevin Gausman to the mound tonight.
All right, let's end on curling. The inaugural season of the Rock League got underway yesterday.
Yeah, it's been sort of buried in all of the Olympic curling and world championships, but the Rock League is sort of this big experiment to shake things up. You have teams that are club teams, not provincial or country-based teams. Different rules as well. For example, in the 7th end and only the 7th end, stones that are on the button count for 2 points. That's a huge departure. Lots of changes to wrap your head around, and Kiri Anderson says that she's here for all of them.
Us curlers, we're always excited for change and always looking forward to something new. And, playing with people from different countries, it's going to be so much fun. And I have a really great team and excited for that. And, it's just something different and new. And I think it'll be a hit.
Yeah, if you want to tune in to all of the new, you can do it on CBC Gem. That's where the first week of competition is streaming.
All right, Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That's Morning Sports on CBC with Paul McGowan. It is -6 in Winnipeg. In traffic, we have that issue at Portage Avenue that you want to watch for. So Portage and Westwood Drive treated as a flashing 4-way stop with reds after the signal pole went down from an earlier incident. 788-3093 if you need us. And right after your CBC News from Manitoba, forget the weather. We're going to go for ice cream. Stay with us.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -6, and we are in the first full week of April is gone, and still we have snowfall warnings in our forecast. Today, the snowfall warning covering parts of western Manitoba, parts of the Interlake. Anywhere from 15 to 30 centimeters of snow is possible. In Winnipeg, not as much, 2 to 4 centimeters. It all gets going with some light snow this afternoon, windy, and a high today of 0. People working with refugees in Winnipeg say a wave of Somalis is heading into Canada to avoid getting caught up in a U.S. immigration crackdown. U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in speeches against illegal migrants. CBC's Arturo Chang reports.
They flee from possible deportation and persecution.
Najib Warsames says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing more Somalis north. The Winnipeg refugee advocate says he's heard from many who risk crossing the border over the winter as the U.S. government works to end protections letting them live and work in the States.
I don't want them in our country.
U.S. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in tirades against migrants, a lot of whom live in Minnesota, south of Manitoba. Immigration lawyer Alistair Clark says while the U.S. is not safe, Canada is making getting asylum harder. Ottawa recently passed Bill C-12, which sets time limits for claims. Clark says many of his clients have been impacted.
Tightening the restrictions, in my view, that's not a good solution.
The federal government says the new law makes the system more sustainable and that there are still safeguards protecting asylum seekers facing serious harm. Arturo Chang, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. President Donald Trump's deadline is just under 13 hours away for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to all ships or face destruction of its energy facilities. Trump's deadline appears set in stone. Now, Iranian Winnipeggers are watching the situation in their home country closely. Saeed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba. He has a brother and sister in Iran who he's only been able to speak briefly to in a couple of instances since that war started. Ghavami is not surprised the Iranian regime has rejected a ceasefire.
They use crisis for their existence. They want to survive. Even one more day, they want to survive. The most important thing is that they know that, if there is a regime change in Iran, they don't have any place to go. This is their final battle.
Ghavami says his greatest fear is the war will end without a plan to change the regime and bring in democracy. Heading home. I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. And having seen that dark side of the moon, London, Ontario's Jeremy Hansen and the rest of the crew of Artemis 2 are coming back to Earth. Their lunar orbit was a step towards eventually establishing a base on the moon. They saw craters, of course, as well as the landing sites of Apollo 12 and 14. Splashdown of the capsule called Integrity isn't until Friday off the coast of California. This mission saw them go deeper into space than any before them, more than 406,000 kilometers. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Well, it's not just spring in Winnipeg. Election season is only 3 weeks away. CBC's Bartley Kivas explains.
2026 is an election year in the city. Candidates for mayor can register around 24 days from now, at the beginning of May. Registration allows them to raise and spend money on their campaigns. Candidates for council seats can register at the end of June. So far, half of councils committed to running again, including Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham. The election takes place October 28th. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, the Winnipeg Jets got cracking last night.
The shot, he scores! Brad Lambert will bring the house down with that goal.
Brad Lambert in the third period on prime as the Winnipeg Jets handed it to the Seattle Kraken. 6-2 the final. Here is how Lambert saw that goal.
Slowed up a little bit and looked over to see if I got anyone to pass it to, but at the end of the day I felt like I was in the best spot, so I decided to let it rip.
Kyle Connor also scoring twice. Mark Scheifele earning his 900th career point. Now the Jets head back out on the road playing Thursday in St. Louis. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Time for the regional forecast on CBC. The active forecast, I'll call it. I'm going to try to smile the rest of the show about it, Abby.
2 to 30 centimeters. That's all I'll tell you. Of snow coming our way. Messy drive, some windy conditions, but they should taper off as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. Across the southern regions, temperatures between -6 and -14 as the snow moves into the western parts of the province, while up north we're looking at temperatures between -14s and -22s with sunny conditions up north. But for Winnipeg right now, some sunshine outside, the clouds are rolling, light snow will start around the noon period, then it's going to turn windy, and we're currently around -6, and we should get to 0 later today, but we should see about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow tonight.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
It is what it is, folks, before it gets warmer on the weekend, hopefully. Got a ways to go. Corey Funk is in to talk about the annoying commute. You biked in this morning, right?
Yeah, it was just little icy patches here and there, so not super fun. You think you got it, and then what used to be a puddle is now a big old patch of ice. So heads up, there's slippery patches if you are. The same thing on the sidewalks as well, so look out for that. And keep in mind if you do plan to take the river trail, it is underwater underwater right now between the ledge and the forks because of the melting going on. So look out for that. There used to be an issue on the roads at Portage and Westwood that is now clear according to the city, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you do see anything else going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
7:37 a.m. Tuesday morning. Some beautiful sunshine coming down. If you stay inside, it looks like spring. Of course, if you go outside, we are well below normal. Abby's been mentioning normal for Winnipeg at this time of year is 8 degrees above. So we would be melting everything with that. Well, it is taking some time for our province to embrace spring, but some Winnipeggers say the season officially kicks off for them when you can at least eat ice cream at some of the local shops that are open, like one of the classics, Sergeant Sunday on Portage Avenue. CBC's Jim Agapito stopped by to speak to General Manager William DeSosoy to see how the first rush of the season is going.
What does it feel like to be, back into the season of selling ice cream?
We're just back full go at Sergeant Sunday here, where everyone's excited because we're open. It's spring. People want to get out of the house. They want to go for walks. We're right across from Assiniboine Park, and people in generally are very excited just to get out and get their fix of ice cream.
Now, why do you think Winnipeggers like to get ice cream even though it's still cold and there's still some snow outside?
People just, after being cooped up inside all winter, they just want to get out. They want to go for a walk. They want to feel that sunshine and just enjoy a Winnipeg staple Sergeant Sunday ice cream treat.
What's your full name?
William Tutu.
Okay, you're getting an ice cream today. This place just opened. What are you having?
Chocolate milkshake, vanilla milkshake, and a root beer milkshake.
3. Are you getting it for your family?
Yeah, for my friends, co-workers.
Okay, why did you decide to get milkshake? There's still snow outside, so I'm curious.
Because it's all winter we drink coffee. Now that this is open, we have milkshakes and have something cool. I am at Enoch, and Enoch's love ice cream.
So is this your first milkshake of the year?
No, it's not. I had about 3 since this opened up.
You've been open for a couple of days. What's the vibe been like with customers?
So on the first day we were open, we had a lineup for people ready to come in. People, they drive by, and as soon as they see our windows get cleaned, they know that we're opening. And social media, they tell everybody, and it was on the radio, and everyone's just so excited to come out.
And how's that feel for you as an ice cream shop?
I'm ecstatic. I'm glad that I can make people happy. It's fun. Seeing customers happy and engaging in the community.
Hi, what's your full name?
Fernando Aguiluz. Get vanilla and mango. Why? Because it's the start of the season. The weather changed, and I want to take the taste of the Sanger Sundays. I want to bring my son and friends. Yes, every year. I make a tradition now. You come next year and see me again.
And so what is the go-to that you'll have?
My favorite thing to do is the first sample off the vanilla ice cream machine as soon as we set it up for the first time. There's nothing better than the taste of nice creamy vanilla ice cream.
Why is that the first thing you do? There's so many different things to check out.
It's just getting back up and running, that feeling, pulling that handle, the first taste of vanilla ice cream, it's the best for me.
Hi, what's your full name?
Savannah Heward.
Tell me, why did you want to get ice cream today?
I actually prefer the ice cream here because it's real ice cream.
It's kind of the beginning of spring. Why do you think that is?
Because now we know that winter's over. Nobody likes winter here, but we stay anyways.
What is it that you decided to have here today?
So the very cherry cheesecake is my favorite.
Okay, why is it your favorite?
I don't know, it just is. I actually don't like real cherries, but I love cherry cheesecake.
Okay, for people who haven't been here yet, for the season, what's the absolute thing that you'd recommend them having? Like, what is it?
We have a lot of different options. We've got 24 hard ice cream flavors, a bunch of different soft ice cream flavors. It's hard. Everyone has their different tastes. Come out and enjoy an ice cream. Go for a walk in the park.
Rusty Robots. Local music for you, Ice Cream Truck. We couldn't resist. You just heard Jim Agapito out at Sargent Sunday in Winnipeg, and in fact, you might see some more shops open now that spring has officially arrived. 7:42.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
Well, more than a month ago, we learned that an 18-year-old woman who was in the care of Child and Family Services was killed in Winnipeg, and that a 14-year-old boy had been charged with second-degree murder. Her name was Avanti Hartlieb. Now, a group home worker who helped look after Avanti before she was killed is speaking out. She believes a lack of consequences and support for youth in CFS and in the system may have further endangered the teen. The CBC's Rosanna Hempel joins us with more on the story. Good morning.
Good morning.
So can you tell us more about Avanti to begin with? What was it like for her living in this particular group home?
Well, in the days after she died, I heard from family and friends that she was someone with dreams of going to college and traveling. She'd have a big smile on her face. She'd light up her room. And it was very clear from those conversations that she was loved by many, many people. Her father says she'd also struggled with addictions and depression under CFS care. Avanti was a member of Satchiko Lake First Nation in Ontario, but had been in care in Manitoba for most of her life, most recently with Enamiki Osasan Child and Family Services. Most recently, too, she'd been living in a group home in Winnipeg. Her father, David Hartlieb, would have calls and visits with her over the years. Here's what he shared about how she adjusted to group home life.
It was harsh at first because the kids were older and there's not much stuff to do. There's no video games. My daughter always had to ask me for the Netflix, and they're restricted from their privacy. They just want to be alone for a moment, but they can't do that.
And he says he fought for years to get his daughter back, but essentially was told that that would never happen.
We mentioned you spoke with a group home worker who helped look after Avanti before she died. What did they tell you about the home?
Yeah, this group home worker told me that Avanti was living in a home in Winnipeg run by a company called Pathways Forward Youth Services, formerly known as Kildonan Common. We're not naming the worker because she's not authorized to speak about her work publicly. She told me that Avanti was one of 5 girls living in the group home. There would usually be 2 casual or full-time workers on shift at a time supporting the youth. They would do activities with them, help clean, prepare meals, drive residents to appointments, and keep a daily activity log for each young person, including descriptions of what they were wearing when they left home and with whom. And she says there were also house rules for the youth. They had to abide by curfews, go to school. She alleged, though, that those rules were broken repeatedly, and at times paramedics and police had to get involved, including for incidents involving alcohol, cannabis, and meth. And just to note, the worker's voice has been modified to protect her identity.
I can attest that those rules were not enforced or stricter consequences. They were very loosely set, and always, more often than not, those rules were broken. They were supposed to go to school or meet with their therapist or action therapist. Again, not mandatory, no repercussions.
And this is where the worker feels really conflicted because she alleges that Avanti and 2 girls from her home were out past curfew on the night she was killed.
What else, Rosanna, do we know about what happened that night?
Well, we've learned that they were out past their curfew, which was midnight on that Friday. Avanti had turned 18 a few weeks earlier, and the two girls from her home that she was with were underage. One of them had a court-imposed curfew. Somehow they ended up at a residence on Yonge Street, and the worker says she wasn't working that night, but was later told by the two girls that one of them had heard a loud bang in that residence on Yonge, and the other saw Avanti, who was their friend, dead inside that residence after. Following the shooting, they contacted the group home staff and were taken home. And the worker told me they feel so torn up about this because this curfew that was broken was part of an ongoing pattern of curfews and other house rules that were broken.
I'm speaking out because of that nothing is being done about this. That it's a cycle, it continues. I'm feeling that CFS is more of a business than it is actually of a caring services provided to the youth, and that word is in their title. It's just, this is the extreme situation of what snowballed into, like, with all the situations and all the non-enforced or mandatory situations snowballed into this extreme situation.
And she says she felt helpless and limited in what she could do amid company protocols.
What were those protocols?
Yeah, I will say first that we asked Pathways Forward for an interview about the allegations, about their protocols, but they declined and did not provide a comment through their lawyer, citing CFS legislation. The worker told me they were instructed by the company to ask youth where they were going if they left the group home, and to ask whether they would return by curfew. And they were told not to chase residents, not to confront them after they left the property, partly due to safety. And sometimes the youth would leave so quickly or without notice that the workers wouldn't have the opportunity to ask. And if residents weren't back by curfew, the workers were to call ANCHOR, which is an acronym for the Child and Family All Nations Coordinated Response Network. This agency is in charge of all emergency and intake child and family services for the Winnipeg area. And the worker said ANCHOR would decide whether to contact police and help locate any missing residents.
Just to be clear here, did staff call ANCHOR or police that night?
So we don't know for sure, but this worker and a former caseworker with Pathways Forward told me they expected ANCHOR would have been called given the company's protocols. Pathways Forward did not confirm or comment whether its staff had reached out to ANCHOR, and neither did that agency. Police told me, however, they did not get a missing person report for Avanti that night. The former caseworker I spoke with is Darlene Pelly. She recently left the company after about a decade there, and she gave me a bit more context on what group home workers could and could not do. She argued staff were hamstrung by directives coming from CFS agencies that limited their authority over youth who broke rules and other house rules. And she says staff would encourage residents to do activities at home, but she said workers could not force the youth to go to school or prevent them from leaving the group home or punish them if they broke rules.
The agencies have kind of given a lot of pushback when it comes to, I guess, consequences. They feel like natural consequences are natural consequences and those should happen, but we can't. And there's not a lot that we could do. Even if consequences was a thing, like we were allowed, what would we do? Like, you're grounded, okay, well, I'm leaving anyway.
Pelly told me she believes staff would do everything within their control to keep a youth at home, but the group home is not locked and youth can leave when they want.
So what did Avanti CFS agency say in response to these allegations and concerns?
Yeah, Animiki Osasan Child and Family Services said it has no comment right now. We also asked Families Minister Nahani Fontaine about the case. Minister Fontaine could not speak specifically about it, citing the ongoing police investigation. But she says generally that CFS legislation compels people in the CFS system and outside the system who feel that if a child is at risk, they report that information to CFS.
And there's a system in place for folks that feel like maybe children are not getting the supports that they need. There's a system in place for them to bring that to the attention of the agency and the authorities. They have an obligation to do that.
We also asked whether the province was looking into any of the CFS agencies involved and pathways forward regarding the group home conditions. Fontaine's office said an investigation was underway with CFS. Coming back to our case, though, the worker who spoke with us is so worried that kids in care will continue to be at even more risk and that another situation like this could happen again if systemic changes aren't made.
All right, Rosanna, thank you for bringing us your report today.
You're welcome.
That's Rosanna Hempel, who is a reporter at CBC Manitoba. She'll have more on the story tonight on CBC News at 6, and you can read about it this morning at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Hi, I'm Ella Maya Tailfeathers. I am an actor and filmmaker. I am defending A Minor Chorus by Billy Ray Belcourt in this year's Canada Reads One Book to Build Bridges. It encourages us to reflect on the places that we come from, where we can be tolerant and celebrate difference and embrace others in a way that I hope we can in the future in this country.
Canada Reads. It all starts April 13th. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
Well, when you look at the weather today and you see the snowfall warning for central and western Manitoba, 15 to 30 centimeters expected through areas like Gimli, up through Erickson, Riding Mountain Provincial Park, right through Hecla, Swan River, St. Rose de Lac. And you hear that in Winnipeg, we're expecting a further 2 to 4 centimeters here in Winnipeg. That's our number for southern Manitoba. You might be feeling a little blue. So we thought, well, you're already down there when it comes to the weather. Why don't we talk about ticks? Because apparently ticks can actually survive a lot of cold. That means the tick season might be closer than we think. This morning, Laura Ferguson, a biologist on this who studies ticks at Acadia University.
In the winter, the ticks are largely seeking sheltered places to be dormant. So when it's cold outside, as it has been for quite a while now, their bodies really just slow down. And so they look for places where they can stay a bit protected. And largely that's going to be under layers of leaf litter, and sometimes a nice big layer of snow also is a great bit of insulation for them to protect them from the harsher temperatures that are happening out in the air. They can make their bodies a little bit better at surviving low temperatures. They can create molecules in the body that help them make sure that their bodies don't freeze, even if the temperature is below zero. So they're not too upset if it gets cold, right? They can withstand that pretty well. There's sometimes a good thing about being cold in that cold will make their bodies slow. And so that means that they don't need food, right? So they can go through this period of time where there's not much host activity either, and no problem, right? They can just wait it out. So, I mean, the bad news is that they're actually pretty hardy. And so they can survive quite a while at low temperatures, particularly if you're thinking in sort of the 0 to -5 range. They can go for several weeks, months at those temperatures, and they'll be just fine. You might get a few that die, but in large portions of the population, no problem. Any temperatures below that, if you start to get a little bit colder, you'll get increasing numbers of death in our ticks past that. But like I said, where they're spending the winter, it's pretty protected under those layers of insulation, and they're unlikely to get to those long, really prolonged, really cold temperatures for the winter that perhaps we're feeling up in the air.
Why are all the nasty things so hardy, right? That was a little bit about ticks in the winter. Biologist Laura Ferguson from Acadia University. So maybe we should feel good that it's -6, because remember, -5 and below, or -5 and above, they do better. It is -6 in Winnipeg. Same in Brandon. It's partly cloudy here in Winnipeg, although the downtown, lots of sunshine and blue sky. Mostly cloudy in Brandon. Thompson's -23 and mostly clear. We are expecting, as I said, a couple of centimeters of snow in Winnipeg, 2 to 4. A high of 0 is what we're we're looking at here. In Brandon, you're expecting a high of 2 degrees, really gusty winds, and some freezing rain possible tonight with snow beginning later. Through the Parkland region and Gimli, up around west and central Manitoba, 15 to 30 centimeters. There is a yellow level warning issued for snowfall today. In traffic, we have an update. Phil just called our commuter line. He says southbound Waverley, just before McGillivray, there's a stalled car in the center lane and backups are just starting. So be careful if you want to call us on anything. Please use the commuter line at 204-788-3093. Coming up on the show after 8 o'clock, and I think this is a good question for you to call listener line on as well. When presented with big ideas to transform and shape our city, is Winnipeg's default position no? CBC Manitoba's urban columnist thinks that's the case. We'll have that discussion with that columnist ahead on Information Radio. And if you think that we have, well, an attitude problem, 788-3205. Give us a call on the listener line in advance of that column, but we'll have that coming up for you on the show after 8. You are with CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Abby Adiyemi, Corey Funk, and Darren Marash in our control room. And over in our news center, we have Heather Wells, who is here now with our headlines this morning, just ahead of 8 o'clock. Hello.
Hello, good morning. Well, a refugee advocate says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing many Somalis north. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in anti-immigration tirades. The Salvation Army says more than half of the refugees who stayed at its Winnipeg shelter in the past 6 months have come from the U.S. Winnipeg's Iranian community has a close eye on the war in their home country. Saeed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba. He says people are getting anxious as this war drags on and deadlines approach. Ghavami says his greatest fear is the war will end without a plan to change the regime or bring in democracy. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of that U.S. deadline, tonight at 8 o'clock, in the last half hour, President Trump has, U.S. President has once again taken to social media. We're going to get some analysis of that and more coming up on World Report at the top of the clock. It's 1 minute to 8. Stay with us on CBC.
On cue. Robert Bateman has spent his whole life painting and protecting the natural world. But even with all that success, he's had to fight to be taken seriously as an artist. Robert will be here to talk about that journey and why he thinks his work has been left out of the National Gallery of Canada.
They think I'm just too digestible, sort of like a peanut butter cookie or something.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Dave Seglins. Toronto City Council has voted to test out public grocery stores in some parts of the city. They already exist in many parts of the world. How well will they tackle food insecurity? That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. There is panic on the streets of Tehran as residents scramble through the rubble of fresh airstrikes. There has been a desperate plea from the Iranian regime asking people to shield the country's infrastructure from Washington's promised bombing campaign. Through an interpreter, here's what a regime official said on state television.
I invite all the youth, athletes, artists, university students, and our professors to gather around the power plants that are our national assets and capital.
The deadline imposed by Donald Trump to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is just hours away. The U.S. president is threatening to decimate Iran's bridges and power grid if the shipping lane remains closed. Let's go to Willie Lowry now in Washington. Willie, in just this past hour, Trump dialed up the rhetoric again on social media. He says a whole civilization will die tonight. He also says he hopes it won't happen, that maybe something wonderful can come of this. This is incredibly strong language, but over the past month, we've seen several of Trump's deadlines come and go without consequence. Could that happen again tonight?
Martina, all rhetoric out of the White House points to this 8 p.m. deadline as being set in stone. U.S. President Donald Trump has already pushed his ultimatum back several times, and the remaining hours are a critical period. Mediators led by Pakistan have yet to be able to bring the two sides close enough together where a ceasefire is feasible. Trump says any deal will likely require Iran to allow the safe passage of oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
We want free traffic of oil and everything else.
Trump has repeatedly threatened to target civilian infrastructure and send Iran back to the, quote, Stone Ages if he doesn't get what he wants.
As you point out, Willie, the president has been explicit about targeting Iranian infrastructure. What is the response in Washington to warnings that that could constitute a war crime?
Democrats have been very vocal about their concerns. Targeting civilian infrastructure can be a violation of international law. Trump brushed aside any concerns that he might be committing war crimes when asked by reporters. Meanwhile, some in the military establishment believe the targets are fair game because they are dual use, meaning the military also uses and relies on them. Here's retired U.S. Admiral Andy Loisel.
Obviously, they benefit civilians, but they also provide the power to run any of the military systems that they have remaining left to them. And then any of those bridges are also military supply routes as well. So I would refer to them as dual use targets.
The chances of the International Criminal Court pursuing charges against the Trump administration if it carries through with its threats are next to zero. The U.S. is not a member of the court and has long had a complicated relationship with it.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
The man heralded as Australia's most decorated living soldier is now charged with war crimes. Ben Robert Smith served in Afghanistan between 2006 and 2012. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for his service. He now faces 5 war crimes murder charges. Police say Robert Smith was involved in the deaths of Afghans who were not taking part in hostilities when they were killed. Chrissy Barrett is Australia's federal police commissioner.
It will be alleged the victims were detained, unarmed, and were under the control of ADF members when they were killed. It will be alleged the victims were shot by the accused or shot by subordinate members of the ADF in the presence of and acting on the orders of the accused.
3 newspapers previously published allegations Robert Smith murdered Afghan civilians. He failed in his attempt to sue those papers for defamation. Alberta's separatist movement and lawyers for Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation will be in court this morning. A 3-day hearing is about to begin. It will consider whether a separatist referendum violates Indigenous treaty rights. The CBC's Joe Horwood takes us through the arguments.
Whenever it comes to treaty, then we have to do something.
Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation Chief Sheldon Sunshine says their fight isn't necessarily with separatists, but with government.
Our treaty was signed with the Crown. You know, Canada has a responsibility to uphold that.
Sunshine says the lawsuit was prompted by the Alberta government's passing of Bill 14, which removed the requirement for a referendum question to align with the Constitution. The First Nation says separation would violate treaty rights enshrined in Section 35 of the Constitution Act.
This is against Alberta and the Chief Electoral Officer for allowing that unconstitutional question. And of course, we name Canada to see where they are in all of this.
There are 2 ways a referendum gets on the ballot. One, with a successful citizen petition.
Or the provincial government, whichever way we decide to do that.
That's separatist leader Mitch Sylvester speaking on a podcast last month. While he's not confident his initiative will survive today's hearing, he expects the question will still be on the ballot.
I would absolutely expect it to go forward.
Should the injunction be denied, Chief Sunshine says there will be a lot of work to be done ahead of a possible referendum. Joe Horwood, CBC News, Calgary.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is in Hungary. It's a show of support for the country's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. After 16 years in power, Orban is behind in most polls, with Hungarians voting in just a matter of days. Crystal Gomansing reports.
Trumpets and Hungary's Foreign Affairs Minister Peter Szijjártó met U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife on their arrival in Budapest. Vance has 2 days of bilateral meetings with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Thank you very much for being so kind to visit us.
The visit comes as Orban faces his biggest political challenge in more than a decade, trailing in the polls by double digits. The government has betrayed the Hungarian and European interests, says Peter Magyar, the opposition leader. Magyar told a crowd at a rally last month Orban wants a kind of Russian puppet state. Orban's a proponent of Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump, and is often seen as a thorn in the side of the European Union, opposing the group's migration policies, support measures for Ukraine, and advocating far-right causes. In a joint press conference, Vance accused the EU of interfering in the election and said he sees Orban as a statesman.
But I think that what the people of Hungary, what I would encourage them to do is ask themselves the question, not who's pro or anti-Europe, not who's pro or anti the United States of America, but who is pro-you. In my experience, I've seen a guy who has ferociously advocated for the interests of Hungary.
Orban and Vance will also be attending a political rally together. Voters in Hungary head to the polls Sunday. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
The Artemis 2 astronauts are on their way back to Earth. Their record-setting loop around the far side of the moon is over. This leg of the mission, a success. Astronaut Jeremy Hansen isn't the only Canadian playing a major role. As Karen Pauls reports, astronaut Jenny Gibbons is working as a lunar capsule communicator.
Today, for all humanity, you're pushing beyond that frontier.
That voice from NASA's Mission Control in Houston to the Artemis 2 crew is Jenny Gibbons.
I'm just so pleased for Jeremy. I am so pleased for Canada. We saw so much cool stuff on the moon, and I really am just thrilled to be a part of it. What a cool day.
She's the Canadian Space Agency astronaut who trained as a backup to Jeremy Hansen and the primary voice link between the ground flight control team and Orion, communicating flight details and technical tasks.
It was a testament to some of the amazing stuff that you can achieve and learn when you have a shared mission and a shared goal.
U.S. President Donald Trump echoed that when he called the crew later.
Today you've made history and made all America really proud.
Hansen thanked Trump for his leadership.
I've said this many times before, a nation that leads like that and creates and sets big goals for humanity that brings other countries along with it is truly incredible.
These are the first astronauts in more than half a century to be cut off from the rest of humanity when their spaceship slipped behind the moon, severing communications with Mission Control. When Christina Cook reestablished contact 40 minutes later,
it is so great to hear from Earth again.
It was Gibbons who responded.
We are earthbound and ready to bring you home.
After they return, the crew has been invited to the Oval Office, where Trump says he wants their autographs. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, just go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Did you have a long weekend? Get to celebrate Easter? Maybe an extra long weekend with yesterday off? Well, welcome back to a short week. It is Tuesday morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. You are on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. We are still well below normal for where we're supposed to be weather-wise at this time of year, and we're expecting snow. So Abby's going to tee up where the warning area is coming up. This hour on the show, we have quite a conversation to get into. I think this one's going to be a bit of a talker. When presented with big ideas to transform the shape of our city, is Winnipeg's default position, no, we're not going to do that? CBC Manitoba's urban columnist thinks that is the case. That discussion's ahead on Information Radio. And if you think that's the case, why? What do you point to that frames that point of view? 788-3205. can weigh in advance. But we do have that conversation coming up. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells. She has her eye on what's developing in news this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, as you heard on World Report, U.S. President Trump this morning is threatening on social media, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight as his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz nears. Winnipeg's Iranian community is watching closely. Sayed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba. He says people are getting anxious as this war drags on. We're going to hear from him coming up. And a Winnipeg refugee advocate says many Somalis are coming from the U.S. into Canada to avoid getting caught in an immigration crackdown. That story as well in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
It is 8:12 now. Let's go to Abby, who's standing by with our weather forecast. Hello.
Yeah, still tracking the Alberta Clipper from we got those statements from yesterday and even into today. It's going to be posing really an impact on the province, bringing sharp contrast between heavy spring snow into the central part of the province. And we're still going to be seeing those lingering wind chills in the northern part. Hence the yellow snowfall warning we have in effect for the Interlake region and even into the Parkland region, where late season Clipper could dump between 2 and 30 centimeters of snow between today and Thursday. Southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, also under this special weather statement. We're looking out for messy, slushy accumulations in this part of the province. And up north, we're still seeing the wind chills there close to minus 30 as you travel towards the Churchill region. Winnipeg starts in the day around minus 5, minus 6. We saw some sunshine, the clouds rolling in. We should expect light snow to begin around the noon period. The speed is going to pick up. The wind is going to pick up speed. We're going to see 40 to 60 clicks near noon period. We're heading to a high of 0 later today, and those temperatures will actually climb to about maybe +1 as we get into the overnight period. But we're anticipating for this part of the province between 2 and 4 centimeters of snow if the system comes our way. Now across the south, we're seeing temperatures between 6 degrees and at -6 and -14 at this time. But where the action is the central region. We're looking at between 15 and 30 as that system comes through western Manitoba and towards the Dauphin and parts of the lakes.
Yep.
Into Thursday, Marcy.
Pretty much everywhere. All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey, I heard yesterday when you were filling in for me, you were hanging on to Saturday.
Yes.
So
and it's already
Saturday-
changed. Yesterday the forecast said 13.
Oh.
And now it's already dipped to, I think, 8 last
It's
I
8,
looked.
yeah. It's still +8, though.
Yeah, it's above 0, so I'll take it. And no snow.
So let's still hang on to that.
Yes.
The commute. You have a sheet in hand. What's going on?
Yeah, I got a call from Philip. He says there's a stalled car southbound Waverly just before McGilvery in the center lane at the time. This was maybe called about 15 minutes ago. He said it was backed up, starting to back up. So it might be backed up by now if it hasn't cleared. So heads up, that stalled car southbound Waverly just before McGilvery in the center lane. If you see anything else going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
8:15 is the time right now on CBC. And up next, as I alluded to, we have a question for you to ponder in Winnipeg this morning and about Winnipeg this morning. When it comes to progress and development in our city, do we have our feet stuck in the mud? As a city, are we afraid of change or possibly slow to embrace big ideas? That is what CBC Manitoba's urban living contributor thinks. Ben Farr dove into the topic in his latest video column, which you can check out online. But he's in this morning to tell us a bit more about it, to get into it. Hi there, Ben.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This is a topic that comes and goes over the years, and I know I've been at different tables where people talk about this. I love that you've done it for your column. Why do you think that Winnipeg as a city is slow to embrace change?
Ultimately, like you said, everyone has great ideas. I'm sure in conversation we've all heard from family, friends about their big ideas, their lived experiences in the city. I think ultimately, though, when you go through the history, through the different examples, Winnipeggers tend to weigh the downsides, the potential risks of the ideas a lot more heavily than the upsides or the great progress that could be made with the changes.
And what historic examples of, the resistance you're talking about did you dig into?
Right. So living this in recent experience, it's something that I knew existed. I didn't realize that it goes over 100 years into the past, looking specifically at Assiniboine Park. It's a staple of Winnipeg. When it was first pitched in 1904, there was a lot of resistance from the RM of Assiniboia, specifically about the park. And then going about 50 years into the future, the floodway was pitched after the 1950 flood as a way to prevent future floods from having as much damage to the city. And we've heard the nicknames Duff's Ditch, Roblin's Folly. These were nicknames that existed because of the potential cost, the potential downsides, the risk that it may not even be needed in the future.
It's funny because I'm just thinking now that you're talking about a couple of examples, my head's going, oh yeah. I just remember people, even Esplanade Real, which is on a lot of our postcards, that there is a lot of resistance. Why do you think this is the case, that the city, including citizens and politicians, pushed back on the developments you were mentioning?
Ultimately, it comes down to the risk versus the rewards, looking specifically at the floodway, for example. This was one of the biggest infrastructure projects in Canadian history at the time, moving a ton of land. And everyone was saying at the time it's a flood that happens once in a century. So you spend all this money, maybe it's not even needed in the future. And so the risks really come down to financial risks, but also some of these projects, they're bold and they're big ideas, and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around sometimes what the extent of the change is going to be for that cost.
We're trying to weigh the risk and get more guarantee that might be available when we're deciding. I mentioned Esplanade Real, but you actually point to the more recent reopening of Portage in Maine, and also the city's rapid transit system as some other more modern day examples where Winnipeg was slow to jump on board. What did you find out there?
Yeah, these are examples that I'm sure we've all been hearing a lot about. Specifically, Portage in Maine, been in conversation for decades. I know in my lifetime I've seen contests for how to reopen it, a lot of conversation, even a plebiscite just under a decade ago. And a couple years ago, the decision was we'll just open it up. After all of that debate decision, we're going to keep it closed. We ended up going with it anyways. It was really just a decades-long delay of something that seemed inevitable at the time. So that example there, a lot of conversation, a lot of debate. Looking specifically at rapid transit, though, that one was surprising because to me that's a recent example, but rapid transit was first pitched to the city in the late 70s. So there was decades of ignoring it, really, and not moving forward, and then debate, and now finally first rapid transit line opened in late 2020. So almost 50 years of delays and debates there.
And what about the rest of them? That's now, right? That's the example. Yeah. What are some potential consequences, do you think, of not embracing big ideas?
Yeah, there's two big ones that stand out to me. The more tangible one is the financial downside. Looking at the floodway, if we had delayed, if we hadn't have gone forward with the floodway, which for years it did look like it was just never going to happen, it would have cost us tens of billions of dollars in damages, and not to mention the emotional factor of losing your home potentially, all of the downsides that comes with flooding. Even 1997, I like to look at the example at the Forks canopies with the different levels of the floods. 1997 would have been devastating if we hadn't have done that. So financial risks there for sure. But in terms of progress, rapid transit is another good example here. Ottawa got roughly the same recommendations that Winnipeg did in the late 70s, and they went forward with rapid transit, opening their first rapid transit line in 1983, and it's become so popular in the decades since that they needed to upgrade to light rail transit just to handle that demand. And so in that time, maybe the cost of progress is, would Winnipeg have a thriving rapid transit system now if we had taken that advice when it was first given to us?
There's actually, I understand, a psychological name for the kind of avoidance you're describing. What is it?
Yeah, the term is resistance to change. Ultimately, the way I've described it is that we get accustomed to the challenges and the issues that we face in our day-to-day lives. It could be traffic, could be bad roads, could even be slow or unreliable transit. We become accustomed to those things. And so when a new big idea comes in and we hear about its great upsides, it can be hard to wrap our heads around those upsides, but it's more tangible to wrap our head around the risks, the downsides, the traffic, the safety. So we tend to fixate more on those, and we're more comfortable with the challenges we're already facing now than embracing this new challenge or taking on this new risk. What
cities should we think of emulating in your view, since you've taken a perspective on this as a columnist, of course, but what cities should we emulate when it comes to embracing change and big picture ideas?
Yeah. One city that I found as an example was very interesting was Paris. they've kind of taken the opposite approach to Winnipeg, taking big risks and just seeing what will work, really optimizing for quality of life for the people who live in the city. So they were a very car-dependent city about a decade ago. They've really prioritized upgrading their metro and improving cycling infrastructure, and it seems to have gone very well so far. So they're taking those big risks. Even more like a random example that maybe isn't as tangible for the quality of life is during the Olympics, they invested a ton of money into cleaning up the river. Maybe that will improve quality of life. They're taking big risks and really leaning into the upside rather than the downside that we seem to in Winnipeg.
What about the psychological challenges we have with this? How can we as a city become more open-minded about change?
It's definitely tough. We're talking about, day-to-day lives when it comes to traffic. It's hard to wrap our heads around spending more time in traffic if we're already spending a while after work. And so really, I guess what I found is that these upsides have a lot of power and they're really great for the city. But looking specifically at the downsides, they don't often end up as bad as they seem. So Portage and Main, I know for years we heard that traffic was going to be awful and there was going to be safety concerns. When we look at traffic specifically, commutes have only gotten marginally longer, maybe up to 30 seconds from the data that I was seeing. And so there's slight downside there for traffic. When we see the upside, like potentially having transit hub at Portage and Main, having more connectivity between different areas of downtown, these upsides really do balance out with the downsides, although they seem a lot more daunting coming in.
Before you go this morning, what's at risk if we don't become more open to projects and initiatives in our city, if we don't change?
Ultimately, looking at the different examples, the risk I see is that we stay stuck in the current moment, the current progress, current infrastructure. A lot of these projects went forward because we needed them. Looking specifically at rapid transit, we needed this connection between downtown and the university. And we need more lines as well now, with that being a focus. But if we stay stuck, as the population grows, as the city continues to expand and grow, we're going to need to do these things down the line anyways. They'll probably cost more money. They'll be harder for us to achieve as we've already developed. So we risk staying in the same place when we're already expanding and then having our challenges that exist day to day get worse.
All right, Ben, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And giving voice, really, and a column to something that, as I mentioned, I think a lot of us have had like pieces of this conversation. So if you want to weigh in, please call us 788-3205. Ben Farr, CBC Manitoba's urban living commentator. If you want more on this series, he calls it My Hometown, including a video that goes with it. Please go to our website and check out the links at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I'm Suresh Das. I've spent my career writing about the local favorites that make Canada's food scene truly unique. I bit into a chili. Woo! From vibrant street food to comforting traditional dishes.
The most important ingredients in jollof rice, love.
To innovative, personal twists. Butter chicken lasagna.
Butter chicken lasagna. That's what made it all happen.
I believe every bite tells a story. Now, I want to share those stories with you.
New series Locals Welcome with Suresh Das. Watch free on CBC Gem.
8:24 a.m. on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Well, maybe after that column, we should have played something that had a title that was a bit different than this, because we're talking about being new and innovative. But the music we have for you next is from Manitoba, Southern Manitoba storytelling at its finest. Multi-award winner Quentin Blair. And now you're going to know why I said the title doesn't quite match innovation. This is Same Old Shift on CBC.
Probably have you running things. Well, I showed up to work with my name on my shirt, clocked on in and did what I was told. I held my nose to the grind, did my share of overtime. Let me tell you, man, it's really getting old. Same old shift, a different day. All day long, it's the same old song, enough to drive a man insane. Same old shift. different day. All day long, it's the same old song, enough to drive a man insane. Same old shift, different day. But I'm getting tired of this. Someday I'm gonna quit, and I ain't never gonna miss this same old shit. Well, I'm getting tired of this. Someday I'm gonna quit, and I ain't never gonna miss this same old shit.
Quentin Blair and Same Old Shift on CBC.
Jacqueline Ferland Smith, a 40-year-old former Canadian military trainer, moves to Costa Rica to follow her dreams, but in the summer of 2021, vanishes without a trace.
How can a woman just go missing and us put out all that effort to find her and she's still missing?
I'm David Ridgen, and this is Someone Knows Something, Season 10, The Jacqueline Ferland Smith Case. Available now on CBC Listen and wherever you get your podcasts.
Corey Funk decided to come into the studio with a piece of paper, and I'm guessing it probably has something to do with traffic.
Yeah, it's just a reminder, an update here. We got to call it earlier. I wish I could rhyme on spec. It is trafficy out there. Yes. So Philip gave us a call. He said there's a stalled car southbound Waverly just before McGilvery in the center lane. So there's backups forming. He said this was a while ago, might be clear, but just heads up if it's slow going southbound Waverly this morning, that might be an issue for you. Other than that, it's kind of icy out there because it was warm and now it's cold and everyone's kind of sad about it.
It's true. He speaks the truth, folks.
So there might be some sad drivers out there, so just heads up for that too.
Yeah, support each other through this time.
Exactly.
Let's say thank yous, actually, because we find ourselves with just a moment here to be able to do that before the news. So I want to thank this morning for their work on the program, associate producer Sofia Peralta-Barone, as well as Jim Agapito, who brought us an item about ice cream. Robin Summerfield and Donna Carrero, producers who work on the program, as well as contributor Ben Carr. In addition, from our news department today, Heather Wells and Joni Nicolo and Alana Cole and Megan Ketchison, who's now working on our current affairs team. So thanks to Megan for her early morning work. Thanks to our Studio 15 team. Our live team is Corey Funk, who you just heard from, Abby Adiyemi and Darren Marash in our Studio 15 control room. Our producers of our current affairs programs here, that is the morning show, the afternoon show, Up to Speed in the weekend is Nellie Gonzalez. And big thanks to Leif Larson as well, who is the senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. My name is Marcy Marcusa. I know we're late in the drive. Corey just given those latest details, but as he just reminded you, if you do see anything else here, we will pass it along if it's a problem before the end of the program. And that number again is 788-3093. Right now, it is time for your 8:30 news from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is still dry out there for now. -5 currently. We're expecting a windy high of 0 with periods of light snow beginning this afternoon. 2 to 4 centimeters expected tonight as well. If you're in parts of western Manitoba or parts of the Interlake, you are under a snowfall warning. Anywhere from 15 to 30 centimeters is possible starting later today. A refugee advocate says a U.S. immigration crackdown is pushing many Somalis north. President Donald Trump has singled out Somalis in anti-immigration tirades. His administration has moved to remove protections that allowed some of them to live and work in the U.S. Najib Wassami says many have come to Manitoba to avoid persecution south of the border.
They are targeted because of their ethnicity, as they are Somalis. They cannot work, they cannot stay there, as you know, so they've been moving from the United States because of that reason.
The Salvation Army says more than half of the refugees who stayed at its Winnipeg shelter in the past 6 months have come from the U.S. Warsami says many new arrivals face overcrowded shelters and can't work while their immigration claims are processed. Multiple U.S. news agencies report American airstrikes on Iran's Karg Island. It is the source of 90% of Iranian oil. However, according to a U.S. military official, oil infrastructure was not the target, but 50 Iranian military targets were. This all comes with less than 11 hours to go before U.S. President Trump's deadline for Iran to allow all shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump this morning threatening on social media, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight." Now, Iranian Winnipeggers are watching the situation in their home country closely. Saeed Ghavami is with the Iranian monarchists of Manitoba. He has a brother and sister in Iran. He's only spoken to them briefly a couple of times since the war started, and he isn't surprised the Iranian regime has rejected a ceasefire.
They use crisis for their existence. They want to survive. Even one more day, they want to survive. The most important thing is that they know that, if there is a regime change in Iran, they don't have any place to go. This is their final battle.
Ghavami says his greatest fear is the war ends without a plan to change the regime or bring in democracy. Heading back to Earth.
Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
Houston, we have you the same, and it is so great to hear from Earth again.
The Artemis 2 astronauts have successfully flown around the moon, a mission that will pave the way for humans to land again on the surface of the moon. Last night, U.S. President Donald Trump called the astronauts.
Artemis 2 are a modern day, you really are modern day pioneers, all of you, and one of them happens to be a neighbor. You know who that is, right? You have a special person over there, a neighbor, and we like our neighbor.
Trump, of course, referring to Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, one of the 4 astronauts. Now, more activities are planned before the splashdown return off California on Friday, including a phone call with the International Space Station. And it is not just spring in Winnipeg. It's also nearing election season, just a little over 3 weeks away. Winnipeggers do vote in a civic election this year. Mayoral candidates can register to run starting in May, and that allows them to raise and spend money on their campaign. Candidates for council seats can register at the end of June. Winnipeg's civic election is October 28th. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather, for the morning.
Thank you.
We are coming up to 8:37, which is the end of our show, and the current is coming up next, of course. But before we get there, let's have a last just reminder of traffic. I know Corey was just in, but he's back.
It's just really that potential issue of stalled cars southbound Waverly just before McGilvery in the middle lane may be causing an issue for folks. Other than that's been pretty quiet out there.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby.
Well, anticipated travel will be difficult at some point between today and tomorrow as this heavy snow bands moving through the region. You should expect limited visibility and challenging road conditions if you're heading towards the Western Lakes and through the Interlake region. These conditions will definitely be making roads very, very hard to navigate. So be prepared for that. -6 to -14s across the southern regions. Most of the regions across the province seeing sunny skies right now. Snow coming in the afternoon, and we'll see highs between, let's just say 0 for Winnipeg, and we should see 2 degrees in some parts in the southern region. But up north, still pretty chilly, -14s to -22s.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, we'll all be watching what happens today with, of course, the war between Iran, the U.S., Israel. So we'll watch what develops closely. We'll have full coverage this afternoon as well and up to speed. In addition, I want to mention some things coming up tomorrow. Our medical column is going to look at seasonal allergies. You might recall that in recent years, there's data that shows that more people are having allergies to different things. They're lasting longer. And so we're going to hear more about what the 2026 picture looks like as spring attempts to approach. Attempts to settle in, I should say. It is officially spring. Also tomorrow we have a panel coming up. Our Gen Z panel is back. As more companies rethink hybrid work, questions are being raised about the future of flexibility and the impact it's going to have on the next gen of workers. So we're going to hear their thoughts on hybrid work tomorrow, our Generation X panel. Generation Z panel. It's not my generation. It's the next generation. All right, let's talk about what's going on next here, and that is the current, as I mentioned. So stay tuned. That's coming up next on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.